We all need the sun. Most of the sunscreen is just full of chemicals. The other part, you're just blocking the sun.
How about skin cancer?
Are we getting into conspiracies now, my friend?
We weren't designed to live in this kind of world. We believe in going back to nature and using nature as the guide for directing us on what to do.
We lived in the sun for thousands of years.
Plastic is not going to be removed from our environment for hundreds of years, even if we did everything right now. Because it's floating in the air. But it's the survival of the wisest now, not the survival of the fittest.
Skin is affected by food and chemicals and the environment and EMFs and blue light.
We want to have a world where people start thinking and stop taking so many SSRIs and antidepressants that they end up in the water system and are recirculated into us, causing endocrine disruptors, making boys wonder if they're girls.
All right, we got to start off with question number one, which is, what's the deal with the glasses from you guys? Because we see you all the time, kind of, or not all the time, but most of the time in like kind of yellowish glasses, and you got yellowish or orangish glasses on now. What do these do for us, and why should maybe some other people be thinking about these glasses?
So these ones that I have on that are clear are actually blue light blockers too. But the reason we wear them is because we're sitting in front of artificial light all the time. We're sitting in front of camera light, in front of computer screen, and our eyes need to be protected from that synthetic blue light, which is coming off all the screens. So we just wear them, anytime we're in front of the bright synthetic light. Now, if we're outside, we don't wear them because the natural sunlight is really what we want. But anytime we're inside, we have the glasses on. So anytime you see me on screen, you're going to be seeing me wearing the blue light blockers.
Do you think there's more reason to be cautious about that at night and maybe not worry about it as much during the day? Or do you think you should just kind of maybe have a little concern about it all the time?
So there's 3 different shades really. The guy we get ours from at EMR Tech, he makes them in 3 different shades. So we got, these ones are the clear that we wear during the day, which is like, will block some of that synthetic blue light, but harmonize it more so it's like you're in the sun. Then there's the yellow ones, which I put on if I'm in no window room, where like a room like this, and there's synthetic light everywhere. I usually wear the yellow. I didn't bring my yellow today. Tom has his yellow on. And then the orange ones are for nighttime. So those are the ones that will help with melatonin to come out in your body, right?
Like orange or red glasses,
orange or
right?
red, yeah. And so what that's doing is it's eliminating all of the blue frequencies and the majority of the green. So that's the stuff that usually, if you were out in the wild, that color light wouldn't be in the environment. And that's the point. You want to eliminate that at night. And we have, we've had a lot of people that buy them and then they say to us like, wow, I can't believe how much more tired I get at night. Now, you can get in the science of it, which is melatonin, right? But really, like the key is you want to be able to sleep when you put your head down. And since we've started wearing them, months ago, we go to bed at like 9 o'clock now and it's lights out like that. There's
seems to make everything a little bit more boring, a little bit more bland, aside from like what the science actually is. Andrew Zaragoza, our podcast engineer over there, he messed with my phone the other day and he put it on grayscale. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but basically the phone looks black and white. So that was a pretty interesting adjustment.
Yeah, I did it because it basically made my phone really boring, So like one of the things that I noticed right away, and I mean like within a day, my phone switched to grayscale. I'm driving to work the next day and I'm like, wow, look at the sky. It's blue.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, it's not that it's changed. It's just that I'm getting artificial colors, just like artificial flavors, So like when you take out artificial sweeteners and you have some fruit, you're like, oh my God, have you guys had fruit before? It's so sweet. Oh my gosh.
Exactly.
It was a very similar experience when, switching my phone to grayscale. I switched my son's switch to grayscale also. He still doesn't care. He likes playing it a lot, but it is a lot more annoying because you don't get all the same like experience with it. It just makes it a little bit more boring.
Yeah. Which is a great idea.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
You guys want these? No.
EMR
Tech.
Tech.
Want them? They're EMR.
Tech.
Yeah, can I try those?
Those are the yellows.
I've been wanting to see.
These are the yellows.
Yes. I've been wanting to see what his other frames are like.
Yeah, we got a lot of artificial light beaming around in here. Jack already yelled at us about that. We got to be outside with the podcast. Maybe next year.
Yeah.
Working towards it.
Oh yeah, those are nice.
Okay.
There we go.
I'm going to switch
those
to these.
are good.
There we go. Upgrade.
Yep.
All right, good.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about maybe get nuance about like vitamins and minerals, not necessarily supplements. We can talk about those maybe later, but vitamins and minerals. You hear people talking about taking vitamins quite a bit. It sounds like a health conscious effort by a lot of folks. Like a lot of people are like, oh, I think I could have more vitamin C. I think that will do something for my immune system or whatever it is they heard. the narrative they heard and they go out and they purchase some of these vitamins and minerals. What are some of your guys' thoughts? What have you guys seen? Because you guys have a family practice, a holistic family practice, right? Where you're actually dealing with clients on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So what have you seen with people taking kind of more standard vitamins and minerals?
Yeah, great question. So I've been selling supplements now for over 9 years, and I do all supplements. So I'm not only do I do vitamins and minerals, I also do herbs and homeopathy. So a big range there. And I can tell you that just working, there's a lot of good things in theory. Like you get these functional medicine doctors that are like, oh, take glutathione and take NAC and take all this stuff. And, I in my own observation, none of that stuff has worked for me. What works for me is getting the food right. And then you can support the body with herbs. That's really the key. Like the herbs are secondary, but if you don't have your food right, nothing's going to work. So I believe that everything is energy. Everything has an energy code to it, an energy signature. And the food, the way that you absorb it is the energy signature that nature provided for you. When you go try to take those vitamins, minerals, and you synthetically make them in a lab, even if it's a good, quote unquote, like we work with some really high standard quality supplement brands. Even those guys, you cannot reproduce the energy that comes in food with the substance. So it's in the exact right amounts, the way it should be if you get it through food. I have a lot of girls that join my program and they're drinking, all the electrolyte drinks and they're taking all this stuff that their, functional doc put them on. And right away they're like, I'm just going to go off all of it. I think they feel like when they get more in alignment with why they're doing what they're doing, they understand what food does in their body. And they meet it with, I'm just going to clear my system out of all this chaos that's around me. And I'm going to start with the food. And that is where you see success. I just had a girl on this morning, my Zoom, and she was in like an explosion, literally got such a severe brain injury that she got a stroke from it. And so for years, she's been trying to rebuild her arm strength and her muscles because everything atrophied, right? She had no strength in anything. And so she's doing DEXA scan. She's working with 20 holistic practitioners on this. Nothing's working for her. She gets in my program.
And for years. I mean, we're not talking like 6 months. We're talking like 10 years of trying this.
And she's just like at a loss. She does everything. She sells saunas, infrared saunas. So she's a big health guru herself. And she gets in my program, and after 6 weeks, they're already seeing that muscle growth start to come back. And she was on all kinds of supplements, everything you could ever think of for years, and nothing ever worked for her.
She needed protein. She said she measured, this was interesting because I heard this while she was talking. When she started, she had 4 inches difference in the size of her arms. So like one side, I forget which side it was, left or right. One side was 4 inches bigger, like in circumference. Right. And she said that in 6 weeks, it has diminished to a half an inch difference. That's how much change when she finally addressed the root cause, which was she didn't need another vitamin, D supplement. She didn't need, like andrographis. She didn't need echinacea. She needed protein.
Is that because of neurotransmitters maybe? What do you guys think? What do you think the mechanism is behind? I mean, just obviously like muscle growth and protein, we know they go together.
So exactly. That's exactly what it is. Almost every woman is protein deficient and they just don't even know it. They've been eating really moderate amounts of protein on occasion, and their muscles are just weak. They don't have the ability to repair.
Just from some context, like how much was she weighing? How much do you think she was eating in terms of protein before? And what did you guys bring her up to?
I bet you the average girl that comes into, the average woman that joins our program, I bet, now we haven't measured this, I haven't done an intake form on it, so this is a little bit of a guess, but it's an educated one. I'd say they're between 40 and 60 grams of protein a day, and a lot of it's plant.
Yeah, so Jen, who's the girl we're talking about, she was eating, I believe, around 60 grams of protein, probably on a good day, maybe. And we bumped her up to 120 plus is what the range is for her height and where she's at and how much weight she wants to lose. And like Tom told you the results. I mean, it's just outstanding, completely changed her life. No supplement could do that.
Yeah. Where do some of these supplements come from? When we get vitamin D or vitamin C and vitamin B, and like we get all these vitamins and nutrients from stuff, but like, where is it extracted from? Like, where are these companies grabbing stuff from?
Yeah. So that you have to be really careful with, because there's a lot of companies that are extracting it from chemicals from China. So we get, they try to use coal tar and pull folic acid out of it, So it's incredibly toxic if you're just going out there winging it and picking whatever you want to pick up, GNC or Walgreens or whatever. Like, I would never do that.
It could have a lot of heavy metals and so on.
It's terrible. I mean, just garbage, junk in those supplements. But if you're going for a really high quality supplement company, they really do their due diligence. You want to find ones that are as whole food based as possible, that are trying to get it in the amounts that you absorb it through your food, because it's really about the amounts. And yes, they're going to be acquiring it in ways that, they get it through the food, but the amounts are really critical, because you can go toxic on vitamin D. You can go toxic on vitamin C. So it's all about, when you're eating a high carb diet, you need a lot more vitamin C. When you're not, you need way less. So it's all about the amount you're taking.
Maybe that's why the carbs and the vitamin C come together in nature.
Correct.
Right.
Exactly.
Can I ask you something? When you say go toxic, like what amounts would you guys say would like have somebody actually have that happen to them? Would it be a lot? Would it be depending on the person?
Yes.
So first of all, maybe for scoping this, would you say, and you're the expert more than me, is most of the things you need to worry about are the fat soluble vitamins, not the ones that are water soluble. Most of the time your body can just flush them out in urine. So the fat soluble vitamins are A, D, E, and K. That's where you got to kind of pay a little bit more attention. And you got to kind of ignore your body pretty hard to really go toxic, but it's possible. There's a lot of people that are really ignoring their bodies. But maybe you want to.
Well, a lot of people through COVID, for example, this is a good example. So through COVID, they went and they got on all these zinc supplements and all these vitamin D supplements. Yeah. And what I saw in my practice with people coming in is they were going copper deficient because their zinc was out of balance, or they were vitamin D toxic, so their joints were hurting. They're coming in, they're like, I feel like I'm 80 years old. And I'm like, well, how much vitamin D are you doing? And we add up their vitamin D, and they're taking 20,000 units a day. And I'm like, that's too much. Like, you're toxic right now.
So this kind of stuff might not throw people off to the point where they can totally see it or understand it, but sure enough, their T3 and T4 is way messed up, and all these other things that are in our body that are supposed to keep us kind of naturally regulated energy-wise are probably thrown off a little bit.
And I think the big thing, we can talk about like the details and the science and the what's toxic, but I think the whole point of who we are is because of this exact conversation, which is everybody gets in a room and we talk about like what the toxic and what's the load and what's the amount here, and our bodies, our brains weren't designed to do any of this. That's the whole thing, right? That's really the central tenet of what we believe. We believe in going back to nature and using nature as the guide for what is directing us on what to do. Because we can talk all day about, this study says this and this study says that, and there's a lot of conflicting information. I think, there's a lot of conversation around the conflicting information, and people like to talk about it, but we aren't designed to do any of this. We shouldn't have to. We have women that join our program that are like, what's this going to do to my cortisol levels? Do I need to get my T4 checked? Do I need to get this checked? And it's like, ladies, like I understand that's your framework. I understand that's your paradigm right now. It's the wrong one. I love you, but it's the wrong one. You're already too late. You're already too far. You've gotten to the point where your genes have expressed poorly because your environment's been effed for way too long.
We're looking at the T3 and T4 because we have medication for it, probably, right?
Exactly. And so, but you're already in the realm of your genes poorly expressing because your environment's been poor. But we shouldn't have to manage our environment. We should just live in our environment. Right. So that's the primal bod thing. Like that's what I always want to get back to is, all day long we can talk about the details and the science and the facts, but we need to think higher level here. And that it's because we're not designed to have to figure this out. This should just all fall into place.
Quick question, because I know we're going to be moving forward off of this vitamin D topic, but a bunch of y'all probably got free vitamin D from AG1 or Athletic Greens. Is there any context where someone should be taking exogenous vitamin D, or is it just go get fucking sun?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes. I love this question because it is so, vitamin D is the one. If you're going to say, I don't want to take anything, you absolutely need to be taking vitamin D. Unless you're living with Jack in El Salvador at the equator.
Making me sweat.
On a boat with him listening to Metallica.
Oh, yeah. So if you're not living at that level where you can get out and get into the sun at all times, or practice like he says the Vikings do, and go get the cold instead of the sun so you can make your own light, that you absolutely need to be taking vitamin D. It will change everything for you. So in my program, we only recommend 3 supplements. That's it. I recommend fish oil, vitamin D, and iodine, because those are the things that we don't get enough in our diet. It's just, we live in the modern world. We're not living in Greece, eating fresh sardines out of the sea, soaking in the sunlight, living at one with our, world around us. We're not doing that. So yes, that vitamin D is huge. I had to lecture my ladies about it this morning on Zoom. I said, you guys need to be taking vitamin D. What happens when they lower their vitamin D is their hormones tank. Their hormones take, and then they start getting menopausal symptoms. They're waking up at hot flashes in the middle of the night. I'm like, what are you doing vitamin D? Well, no, and they forget about it. Well, get in. I'll tell them to go to the tanning bed too, which I know I'm probably going to get shit about that right now, saying that. But I tell them, your body will make, the light from the tanning bed is synthetic, so it's not great. But we live in a modern world, and it's better than nothing. You got to do something, because we really should be closer to the sun than we are.
Yeah, don't go and get burnt from the tanning bed, but some UVA, some UVB lights can be
beneficial.
But if you're really fair skinned, be super cautious. Yeah. Only go in that bad boy for a couple minutes, because you're gonna get fried.
That's the whole thing is don't get burnt. Just be smart enough to not get burnt. You build up your solar callus. You got to be able to go in the sun, be able to stay there. Where Tom and I were in Puerto Rico, we were in the sun all day long. The other key is don't wear sunglasses. If you want to go out in the sun, you don't want to get burnt. Don't wear sunglasses, it's
or sunscreen.
Part of the thing.
Yeah, what's the old sunscreen? We hear a lot about that.
Yeah. Well, our ancestors didn't have sunscreen, right? Our ancestors didn't have sunglasses. Our ancestors didn't, and we just did a post yesterday. Our ancestors didn't walk into a Jamba Juice and carb load in a acai bowl with granola and honey, right? So like, these are the things that just don't,
those things are delicious.
I know. I know they're delicious. And look, it's 80-20. Once you're happy with your body, it's 80-20. Live your life. You don't have to live in a cave to have a primal bod. Right. But you gotta be smart. Your environment, we think about like the environment around us. And when I say environment, people think, oh, that's where I live. It's not. What I mean by environment is it's your epigenetics, all the factors that are influencing the expression of your genes. That's your environment. And so, you shouldn't have to manage those in detail, but you should know which ones are 80-20. Which ones do you push a little bit, you get a really kick-ass response, and which ones, like we got women that are like, well, I'm having this and this and this, and I got this and this problems, and my doctor says this, and I think it's the hydrogen water. It's not, it's like, that's a little tiny one, but your nutrition's a big one. Your sunlight's huge. Like Jack says, being I will tell you, when we shut our lights off at night, and we started doing this since we've been following Jack. We turned all of our lights off at night. And I will tell you, having darkness at night is another huge one.
Oh yeah.
So, managing those pieces of your environment, like that's when life gets really easy.
Question, would you guys not even use like those red light bulbs, or you go dark?
So what's interesting? I'm type 1 diabetic. So he told me, and the conversation, we had a consult with him. So the conversation we had was geared around type 1 diabetes. And his thing was, and I won't put words in his mouth, but high level was type 1 diabetes is often a blue light toxicity problem, right? Because look at India, all of a sudden has produced the most number of type 1 diabetics in the world. And what did they just do? Right? In the last 30 years, everybody's indoors at a call center now. And
I think it's like Norway or Sweden or something.
It's crazy.
Going through it too,
They're all on their Apple computers.
So his guidance to me was, I don't even want you in front of a fire at night. That was to me. Wow. Because I'm extra, I'm
more
maybe
sensitive.
Yeah, I may be more blue light toxic than most. But he said, a candlelight's fine, this and that. Now look, you gotta, life's is life, right? So we put red light bulbs in, we put them on a dimmer switch, we dim them down to as far as possible, and only in the rooms where you need to see a little bit, but we try to keep it as dim as possible. And I'll tell you, it's really important for diabetes, but it is really great for every other, you fall asleep like a rock and you wake up rested.
Yeah.
It was a huge difference. So that's what I was saying, like those are those little things, like you got to know where to push and where you're just spinning your wheels.
Yeah. I think with the vitamin D thing, people can look stuff up and you can find a lot of it in your food too. So if
think
you
I-
don't want to supplement it, you might be able to find it through your food, or maybe a
Yeah.
combination might work really well for some people.
I think I steamrolled your question about sunscreen. Why don't you answer the sunscreen one so I don't go on another rant?
Well, I mean, what are you doing when you put sunscreen on? For one thing, most of the sunscreen is just toxic in general. It's just full of chemicals.
Junk in there. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other part of that is you're just blocking the sun. We all need the sun. That's how we build our redox. That's how our mitochondria get the signal for our bodies to do what it's supposed to do in harmony with nature, because doesn't the sun dictate everything on our planet? It dictates everything. So we need to get that energetic message from the sun programmed into us. If we are all sunscreened up, that's not coming through. So
You guys have children. What are some ways that you protect them from the sun? Because I know some parents are probably like, well, what the hell do I do with my kid if we're out on the beach all day?
You retreat. I mean, you retreat. Like you don't put them out day one in the harshest sun. I mean, you got to be smart, right? Like you can't just be like, oh, I'm just going to, here's my kid without sunscreen on and we're going to go down to Cancun and for day one, but you build like Candi was saying, you build a solar callus by being exposed to all the light throughout the day. And the morning is actually really important to start building that solar callus. And as your eyes start to see the sun, it develops the melanin, which prevents you from getting sunburn, right? And so when you wear the sunglasses, you don't get that. So get the kids out there in the morning when the sun's rising, get them out from, if it's the middle of the summer, get them out there from, 6 to 9, 6 to 10 in the morning, put them under a tent, have them build a sandcastle under a 90% UV blocker or whatever, and then let them go back out at 3 o'clock. You can go on your phone and look at the UV index by hour. Don't let them be out when it's freaking a 9 out of 10 on the UV index, right?
Nobody wants to do that really, typically anyways. Or they're in the water
That's true.
swimming.
Yeah, just at a certain point, doesn't feel comfortable. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And naturally, what do the animals do? They go find the shade. So
But we
that's
went
what
from in Puerto Rico, we went from day one, I got a little pink, right? And I was out there only for like 20 minutes during the peak time. And by day it was like 18 or so, we were out and I was we could be out 100% of the time without getting sunburn. In 2.5 weeks,
All day.
we developed a complete solar callus to Puerto Rico, which is 18th degree latitude.
Yeah.
So that's how fast that can happen. Now, very northern European skin, like I burn pretty easy, right? So it doesn't take as long as most people think.
Yeah.
But yeah, you got to be smart about it.
Natural progression of this idea I have for you guys, because when someone hears, no sunscreen, how about skin cancer? Well, what's going on with that? So what is the deal with people thinking the sun or too much sun will end up giving them skin cancer?
So, are we getting into conspiracies now, my friend? I mean, I think that it's been, part of the story. It's been part of the story to put fear in us to avoid the things that naturally make us strong. That's my firm belief and opinion on it. And if you look at the studies, actually what they've found is skin cancer is greatly related to a vitamin D deficiency. Your skin is an organ. Your skin is an organ, and that's where you make your melanin. I mean, that should be number one, top of mind. I got to get my body in the sun because melanin is one of the most healing substances we make in our body outside of melatonin. But definitely you got to step back and look at the reality of it, which is what Tom said. We lived in the sun for thousands of years, happily.
Yeah.
Before any of this happened. So skin is affected by food and chemicals and the environment and EMFs and blue light. So what is it that we're doing in our environment that now all of a sudden we're seeing this bigger progression of skin cancer where we didn't have it before? So is it the blue light?
But our ancestors didn't have airplanes either, right? So it wasn't easy to go from where we are 43rd latitude in Madison, Wisconsin. You couldn't just do that in, 9 hours on a plane to get down to Puerto Rico, right? So naturally, if we would have been moving and roaming, right? Like just like travelers on a road, like the Oregon Trail style, right? Just walking, we would have had time to build that solar callus, right? Because we'd have dropped a latitude, had degree of latitude every 3 days. And so you ease into it. And then, there's some differences in ethnicity and in skin types and maternal haplogroups of mitochondria, which I know you guys talked about with Jack. And so there's some relevant differences there, but
You're bringing back trauma.
You got to quit bringing Jack up. You keep name dropping Jack.
What about my dad's side? You don't know what you're talking about.
You just outed yourself as myself.
It's just top of mind because we just watched that and we were cracking up. So.
Yeah.
What was great is that he was making fun of us, even though he couldn't see us.
Oh yeah.
He admitted in the beginning of the show that he couldn't see us, and he just kept calling us meatheads and clowns.
Our first, I know when I saw the podcast
I know he
come
speaks
up,
that way, so I was used to it.
He does. So when I saw the podcast come up, I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. I got to watch this. But our first meeting with him, we sat down in front of the computer. It's supposed to be a Zoom, and he's like, don't turn your camera on because then I won't have a good signal. We're like, okay. And so I introduced myself and I say, I'm a nutritionist. And he goes, I'm sorry. First thing he said.
All right, so y'all dealt with it too.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's good.
Oh
Okay.
yeah,
It's
for
fun.
sure.
I feel
It's fun.
Yeah.
better.
We
Likes
still
it.
love him though. I mean, I appreciate, I don't, he said what nutrition is like number 6 on his list. Okay. So here's the story with my story.
Okay.
So he says that, and it's like, yeah, but have you seen all the people living in the sun all day, day in and out, and they're eating all the freaking junk, sugary stuff? Like you go to Puerto Rico, those guys are in the sun constantly, and they're still fat. They're still fat, but they're drinking these huge flavored drinks. They're eating all this, carb constantly, feeding themselves with carbs. So my story is basically how the whole Primal Bod got started was Tom and his insulin. I wanted to stabilize his blood sugar, being type 1 diabetic. And I was like, listen, I'm like, we got to figure this out. Like, this is BS. I was eating a whole foods diet, what I was telling everybody else to eat in my office, which was basically, healthy carbs in moderation, good animal grass-fed, wild protein and healthy fats. And that's what I was telling everybody to eat for like 9 years, right? Well, nobody lost weight, including myself. And every year I'm gaining more and more weight. And so I just kind of threw in the towel. I'm like, I'm an herbalist. I do homeopathy. Like, I just help people with supplements. That's what I do. I don't know anything about weight loss. Threw in the towel on it, was done trying to figure it out. Did 75 hard, had no change in my body whatsoever. I was exhausted by the end of it. And I did the Tony
Horton P90X.
P90X for one of my workouts for a P90, right? So I wasn't just, pussing out on it. I really tried. And then Tom's blood sugar was all over the place. So we were kind of newlyweds at the time and had just gotten together, and I wasn't used to being with type 1 diabetic because it's scary. If he gives himself too much insulin, we got to have a freaking glucagon shot ready to go to get his blood sugar up, right? So what happened was, that's me in the 2021
great transformation. Great job.
So what happened was I was like, we just got to get your blood sugar stable. And the food I was cooking him, which was a delicious food, wasn't helping. I mean, it was a disaster. And I said, okay, so what do you want to do? What do we need to do for you? And he's like, I need to eat meat and vegetables. And I said, okay. I mean, I knew, I went through nutrition school, I'm board certified. I knew it was sugar handling issue. So I was like, okay, let's just do that. So we started just with meat and vegetables. And I started watching what fat did to his insulin and his response, and what protein did, and what vegetables did. And I started just kind of figuring out, like, how is this all working? And being really interested in cellular biology. The nutrition school I went through, we had to learn the Krebs cycle. So it was like no joke. Like Dr. Mercola was in the first graduating class of that school. So I went through one of the most prestigious schools in the country. And so I'm like, okay, this is good. Like, we're getting it pretty good, but I want to really stabilize it. And for type 1 diabetic, you want them to fall between the 100, 120 range, honey, for blood sugar. So we wanted to get him there, and he was at like 150. And so I kept maneuvering the amount of fat and the amount of protein, and maneuvering when he was eating based off his movement, and just really working at one with the insulin, because he has to give himself synthetic insulin. So I got to see firsthand what a ribeye steak does to his blood sugar. You get these people that are like on their continuous glucose monitors, and they message me like, they're like, well, I eat apples or whatever, my blood sugar is fine. And I'm like, yeah, right now it is, but in 15 years from now, it might not be. Your body produces insulin. So you're not going to see that on your continuous glucose monitor. His body doesn't produce insulin. So when he eats a ribeye and his blood sugar goes up to 300 out of nowhere, we know that that's the meat. That's what's causing it, the meat and the fat. So I started working with it, just narrowing it in. And after a month, I stood on the scale and I was down 13 pounds. I was doing everything he was doing. Okay. And I had actually done less exercising.
Less working out.
What did you do differently?
So
Instead of the
insulin.
ribeyes, were you doing something different?
Yeah, it was just working with the insulin. you can eat a ribeye if you're very insulin sensitive and you're moving your ass when you're done eating it.
I see.
And you're not full
Right?
when you start, you know? You gotta be
Also,
hungry.
insulin is a circadian hormone. So it's most sensitive in the morning, right? We're not sensitive at night because we shouldn't be eating anymore at night. So it was all about the eating windows. And there was a lot of days where I couldn't get my first meal in till like 1 o'clock because I'm just busy, right? And then I'd go home and I'd eat dinner at 7 o'clock. And it was just completely screwing with my circadian hormones. My melatonin couldn't come out. I couldn't sleep well because anytime you have insulin leveled up in your body, your melatonin's not going to come out. Just like the blue light too blocks you from getting that melatonin, that deep restful sleep. So then I understood, I was like, okay, this is crazy. I started researching how leptin works. I started looking at Jack's leptin prescription and researching how leptin worked. And I started realizing insulin rules everything. It is the master hormone of all strings, especially in women, because women are built for survival. We have to pass on the mitochondria. Okay. So we have to survive any circumstance. So we are extra fat storing machines. Also, we produce estrogen, which is fat storing. You guys have testosterone. You're lucky. You're fat. You're muscle building. You're fat burning. But as women, we're fat storing because fat is so important to our hormones. As you know, I watched your How to Bulk and Carnivore video, and you say, I made my girls watch that video.
Oh, cool.
And you said in there perfectly, you said, don't drop your fat too low or you'll fuck up your hormones.
Yep.
It's the truth. So our bodies need that lipid molecule to take cholesterol to where it needs to go in the body. And so as women, we need cholesterol. We need to build our hormones, our stress and sex hormones. And when we start messing around with that, what happens is our body just become ultra fat storing machines. If we're in any kind of stress, if we're if we're eating copious amounts of carbs, our body's going to turn that into fat because fat is the diamond of the body. It is our most valuable asset because we can survive anything if we have enough fat in our body. If we go through famine, whatever it is. And our bodies don't know if the stress we face when we're in a fight with our neighbor versus the stress of a famine, it doesn't know the difference between that. So what we do is we work on making the body happy. If you can get the body into parasympathetic mode, which is rest and relax, and you can keep, especially for women, and you can keep it there, it'll start dropping weight. You'll start letting go because a lot of girls come in, they've been on keto, they've been on carnivore, no success because they've screwed their metabolisms up. They've been too high with their ketones. They haven't eaten enough glucose and their body has this barometer in it, which is like, okay, we are going to survive. And if you don't give us what we need to survive, which is glucose and fat, then we're going to tank your thyroid and slow everything down to last the long haul. So that's really the secret and the gold of what we do in our program is we help support the body so it can heal from metabolic damage because that's what most women have. But I kind of got down the rabbit hole there. But all in all, the fat and protein ratios, they're different for men as they are women. They're just different. Like women need fat when we need fat, and we don't need fat when we don't need fat. And having a right amount of fat in your body is all, like dietary fat is all connected to insulin and how your insulin's working. You can do more fat if your insulin's working really well.
If you ever wanted to start a podcast or take your podcast to the next level, I have something very special for you. I am thrilled to announce Full-Time Podcaster, the online podcasting course, is available now at pursuepodcasting.com. If you want to learn all of the ins and outs of how to start a podcast, how to grow a podcast, how to book people on your podcast, Full-Time Podcaster is for you. Everything I've learned over the last 1,000 episodes, over 80 million views and downloads, is all in this course in a very easy to follow, convenient, step-by-step guide, so that way you can build a very successful podcast. As an added bonus, if you purchase this week during launch week, you're going to receive Monetize Like a Full-Time Podcaster, a whole course dedicated to making money on your show. Even if you don't have a big following, you will get that absolutely free if you purchase before April 12th at midnight. So do not hesitate. Please head over to pursuepodcasting.com to learn more details and a better explanation of everything that this course has to offer you. Link is in the description as well as the podcast show notes. Let's build a podcast together. Just pursue it.
I'm 47. My wife is similar age, but my wife is indestructible, so she'll probably never run into this. But a lot of her friends are complaining of like hot flashes and menopause and things like that. What are you guys? What's been your experience with that? How can people maybe get some help or assistance to maybe not have such crazy symptoms? Or are these symptoms natural? Should you have to go through them a little bit? I don't know.
Yeah, great question. So the menopause thing for me, your hormones are your fountain of youth. Like, why would you want menopause? I get all these women that are like, oh, I can't wait to go through menopause. Why? It's going to age you faster, right? You want to keep your period for as long as possible. That's my opinion. In my opinion, I don't want to be in menopause until I'm like 60, right?
Whoa.
I feel like that's a good time. I want to continue with my period through till I'm about 60 years old. So, you know, my girls come in and they're like 52, 53, and they haven't had a period for a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
They get on the program and their periods come back. And they're not pissed because I educate them. I'm like, listen, ladies, this is your fountain of youth. This is what's going to keep your bones young, your muscle on your body. You want to have your period still. And so, and the reason you're having it is because your hormones are back up. Your hormones are working.
When your estrogen goes down, your ability to absorb calcium gets inhibited, right?
Right. And so, but they're still suffering with the poor hormone function because their adrenals are zapped, right? Because after you go through menopause, your adrenals make all your hormones. And so their adrenals are zapped from drinking way too much coffee and having way too much stress. Coffee's a big one. I tell all my women, try to get off coffee. If you want to have a sex drive after 40, stop fucking drinking coffee because it's destroying your sex hormones. Like, it's doing everything wrong for you.
Decaf okay? Because I switched to that a while back.
All right.
Same here. That's decaf, by the way.
Great. Yeah, I mean, decaf's better. It is better. But ultimately, I want them to be free and clear of anything that's going to cause their body harm. And you know, the partner relationship plays a big part in their hormones too. Their ability to stay connected to their partner, because you release pheromones when you have moments. Right? So if you're just dried up on your phone all day, playing TikTok and not paying attention to your husband, you're going to dry up.
You said playing TikTok.
Right? I mean, that's what happens. I see these women and they're just spaced out on TikTok and doing, you know, just
dried up.
They just will get dried up because they're not using it. It goes away.
We need to have women on the show more often, I think.
This is great.
Tell them about your proclivity to choose a certain partner when you're on birth control versus not.
Yeah. So
this is interesting, like with birth control and what it does to what you find attractive. So, you know, we may have less control over our desires than we think we do. We might not be as autonomous as we think we are.
It's a little bit like a guy being drunk, maybe.
Right. So our picker's off when we take birth control. This is actually a study they did. And they found that women who are on birth control choose mates who are more like their DNA. So they'd be more like a brother to them, right? So it's not their brother, and genetically they're not the same, right? But they find weaker mates. And so the girls that are not on birth control find stronger mates, which tend to be the more bad boy type of men. And so they choose that because that genetic mismatch there will create a stronger gene in the child. Because the closer you get with your genes together and in harmony, and it's all energy, right? It's all energy. Like if you have two subdued people together, what are you going to have? A subdued child. So that's the whole key to it is these synthetic birth control are the fragrances, the plastic, all of these endocrine disruptors they're tanking our pickers. We don't have good pickers now. We can't pick the right mate for us.
And what a great recipe for divorce. You know, you get on birth control, you pick your partner, and then you want to have a kid, and now you fucking hate them, right? Because they're the opposite of what you really want.
It happened to me in my first marriage. I was on birth control. We had my son, and then immediately, like after I went off birth control, I was nursing him, and I was like, I want a divorce.
You got the ick immediately.
Yep, I want a divorce now, and we weren't right for each other. So yeah, it's crazy to think of the influences that are messing with us. And it's all hormonally driven. And it affects us minute by minute.
You know? I'm curious about this, and this in and of itself is probably going to be super long, so we don't need to spend too much time on this. But with birth control, right? Like, it's good that more of the ways that it's actually harming women is coming out. But at the same time, I wonder, like, you know, people in poor economic like areas, right? Where, you know, you would like it if kids just like maybe used protection and they were more responsible with that, because kids are going to have sex and they're going to have sex. But at the same time, they don't. And when somebody, a 17 or 16-year-old ends up with a kid, it's like, it's not easy. So what do you think should be some education behind this? Because like, that's just not a situation anybody wants to be in. And then there's the religious aspect too. If a 17-year-old or 18-year-old girl has a kid and the parents are super religious and like, you cannot get rid of this kid, it's a whole fucking horrible situation, right?
The thing that caused human population to explode, which was really convenient, which is that we're super horny and we reproduce like rabbits. It is really inconvenient now because we are getting into a point where exactly this problem is real, right? So I mean,
I would say it all goes back to parenting. You know, the parents have to take control of their child's desire to have sex, and really it's just like you're teaching your kid to drive, right? They have to go through driver's ed, and then you allow them on the road with this thousands of pound weapon, basically, right?
Yeah.
So right now we have, you know, you go into the education system and it's basically worthless, but you know, you have sex ed and it's like, they're not teaching them shit. They're not really understanding. And that's where some of like the values, like the Christians, their values of like, you know, don't have sex until you're married. Like some of those values, whatever religion you are, whatever you choose, that needs to be brought back in. But I'll tell you, I had a lot of friends that had kids when they were 16 and 17, and nothing will shake you to the core like being a mom when you're 16 years old. Man, those women drive hard because they understand right away what they should be doing. And naturally, that's about the age we should reproduce. Culture has told us no.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I'm a young mom. I was 20 when I had my oldest son. So I was young, and I love it because he's going to now carry on the generation, and I'm young enough that I can now support the raising of my grandchildren when I have them. He's getting old for me. He's like 23 now, and I'm like, no girlfriend. And I'm like, oh, buddy, you better start on it because clock's a ticking. Like I have vital energy, and I have to take these grandkids around with me everywhere, and I want to raise them. I want to help you raise them. I want to help your wife raise them. You know, because that's my role.
It's a little bit sidestepping the question, but a little bit not. Like the primal thing, the primal bod thing is we got to reconnect that generational link of wisdom and that knowledge transfer that used to be there, right? Like before we had media and phones and all this distraction. Like now, how much are kids learning from their parents now, right? Like, you know, as a percentage of what that used to be, right? I mean, it used to be that what parents did, the kids did, and that was that, right? That's how you survived. We've broken that link, and that link. Yeah, there's certain things about it, like you don't need that anymore. You know, we don't need to know, you know, the routine to keep the lamp lit in that at the middle of the night anymore. That's not that big of a deal. But some of those things, like you know, that like Candi was saying with those values, right? We've lost the generational link of those values and that wisdom. And that's what we got to get back to. And just, you got to look at things from a broader perspective, right? Like we weren't designed to live in this kind of world. So we got to look back and go, okay, what was the blueprint? What was the template of what it should have been like? And that's what we got to try to imitate again, right? And it comes down to, and even a little bit further is the decentralization of education. When you were talking about educating our kids, you know, we've centralized education. And so what does that do? Now everybody, but the general, it's a general with 1,000 soldiers model. Now all the soldiers are just completely controlled. And so they have no autonomy, and so they have no interest in helping because they're just told what to do. When you give people autonomy, you give them interest and drive to help people. So we got to decentralize these systems in order to bring this power back to people, and people to take their power back from their doctors, from their whatever. You're in control of your family. You're in control of your health. Stop giving that fucking power away.
Something that you mentioned in one of your talks, and I just never even thought about it. And so I think it's important that we try to examine where the health information that you're getting is coming from, you know, and try to go a couple layers deep before you make a decision. Because you mentioned the pharmaceutical sales reps are the ones informing the doctors on what these things do. on what these pharmaceuticals do. That is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Those people
With
I'm
no
sure-
background.
I'm sure maybe some of them are very smart. Maybe some of them do have a background, but it's probably very rare.
Yep.
And they probably just learned it themselves at some conference. And then now they're telling the doctor, and now the doctor is telling you, oh, you're in luck. Your cholesterol's high. Here we have this, there's 14 different options for you to choose from.
And
with
the
things that can
centralized
lower-
head of the network of
Right.
doctors is encouraging that too, right? So it's coming from both ways. It's not just the sales
just
rep,
too
it's
much
the
money
centralization.
involved.
Yep.
There's way too much money
Yeah.
involved for there not to be incentives for that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think that right now is so perfect after we went through COVID and all the BS. It's like people are finally starting to wake up and go, holy shit, there's no one out there for me. I got to do my own work, which is exactly where it should be. You do have to do your own work. I have a gal in my group right now, and I have a lot of healthcare professionals that take my course, and she's an MRI tech professor. So she teaches MRI techs how to use the machine. And she's like, Candi, I mean, she went through all the anatomy, physiology, everything. She's like, I never learned it the way you teach it. And she said, you couldn't be more right on about all of this stuff. She said that the whole system is set up to take money. That's all it is. It's all set up to take money. And the doctors will get on and post on my Instagram feed, and they're like, you're right. Like don't look to us for, healthcare. We're sick care. This is what we do. We get you when you're sick, and we can save your life. We can keep you alive. That's what they're doing right now. And it's sad because most doctors get into it and they want to help people, and they end up causing more harm than good.
Cause no harm is like rule number one.
Yeah. The Hippocratic Oath. Yeah.
And it's so sad because almost all of them have really good intentions. I love doctors. I always thank them for their service because they're not thanked enough. And I'm like, you guys are out there trying, but the whole problem is the education system. It's bought and paid for by big pharma. $1 trillion criminal enterprise.
What you got going on over there, Andrew?
Yeah, I wanted to go back quickly because you were talking about how like you will actually bring periods back into women's lives. As mature as I can be with this topic because I have no clue on any of it. But just like when I researched diapers for my son, I'm like, okay, why is there why is there a scent in these diapers? Like, why is there so much ink in these diapers? I do not want that around my son's junk.
Yeah.
I have my wife and I have my daughter who both are mature enough to go through their periods. And so like when that time of the month does come around, do you have any recommendations for like proper, I don't even know what the hell you call it down there's to help with, again, with that time of the month?
Yes. So period underwear, they are the best. So, you can buy organic pads, you can buy silicone inserts, plugs and tampons and whatever. I don't like having to stick anything up there. I think that is actually will mess with your,
Sucks
meridians.
I couldn't help it. I paused and I was like, I gotta say it.
I prompted it. I set it up to be like as mature as we can. And there we go.
It was always going there.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
So anything unnatural, I don't like, and tampons, even if they're organic cotton, that's still not, don't be doing that. In my opinion, I believe that if you can find a good pair of organic period underwear, they sell them all over now. That's the best because you're just letting everything come out. It's just more natural. That's what they used to do in the pioneer days, right? They just put cloth down there, and wearing a pad is okay, but it's not very pleasant as a woman. It's just like, nobody really likes wearing one. They're bulky. They just get sweat. They make you feel sweaty. So the period underwear are the best. They're the way to go.
Okay.
I'm also curious about this since we're on this topic. I heard some women say like, my period is rough and I can't actually wait to stop for this to actually stop. And that's why some of them actually like birth control because maybe it doesn't give, right? So in those situations for women who have rougher periods, I mean, what's your advice there?
Hormones. And typically what I tell my girls is it usually is always connected back to a high insulin environment because endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is really diabetes of the ovaries, and fibroid cysts, polyps, all of that stuff, skin tags, that's all connected back to too much insulin. in your body. So what we see, we have a girl in our group, her name's Elson, and she had endometriosis. She had polycystic ovarian syndrome. She was hospitalized. She went without her period for a year, and her kids are teenagers. She's nowhere near menopause. And she came into my group. She'd been vegan for many years. And she's like, I know my body needs this. I just keep getting the message. And so she joined in, and within 6 weeks, she started getting her period again. And she had a picture, which I show in my class that I do. Her stomach was bloated like she was 8 months pregnant. And now her stomach is flat as mine, flat as a rail. She had a picture on Facebook of her in a sports bra and her jeans. And her stomach is flat as a rail after 10 weeks of working with our insulin. So her bloating was from her endometriosis. It was from her polycystic ovarian syndrome. It was just a huge not pregnant belly.
So step back, right? So the idea is like, with rare exception, your body's not broken, right? There's this belief that like, oh, I'm broken. No, you're not. So I always point to epigenetic environment again, right? So I always go back to this because this is how if we want to take our power back from Big Pharma and everything else, we got to start thinking like this. So right on the American Cancer Society website. So if you go there, you'll see that it says no more than 5 to 10% of cancer is purely genetic. Right? So what do you get from that, right? Like, oh, okay, interesting. Well, what it really means is that 90 to 95% of cancer comes from your lifestyle. Right? And now do you think it's just cancer? Or do you think it's pretty much everything? Right? So now there's some rare exceptions, Down syndrome, right? There's some genetic diseases, type 1 diabetes, right? Like, I'm not going to get rid of that necessarily by fixing my environment. But the idea is your body isn't broken, right? So you have your original question was, well, the women with the terrible menstrual cycles, but that is the same as women with headaches or women with this RA or women like this or women like that. And the discussion needs to get back to, you're not broken, something in your environment is. Because our genes aren't as different as we want to believe that they are. They aren't. We're 99 point whatever percent the same. So why are we expressing so differently, right? And the truth is that our environments are all over the place. That's why we're so bio-individual. Our environments are all fucked up. And again, environment isn't just where you're standing. It's the things that are causing your genes to express. So why are we bio-individual? Why are some women dealing with that? Why are some women dealing with migraines, right? Could it be that is their environment the exact same as theirs? So what I like to do with like a mind game or a mind experiment. We get women on these discovery Zooms where they're, asking us questions about what we do and how we can help them. And I say, all right, just pretend all 60 of you right now, just pretend that we all got transplanted to the most beautiful tropical island that you could ever imagine, right? We're on a beach. We're outside during the day. We're outside during the night. We're sleeping under the stars. We're eating perfect fish and food from the island. Nothing's been tainted. Nothing is toxic. Everything is beautiful. Your family's around. Everybody's happy. And look, there's challenges. There should be challenges in life. Humans are great and they're best when they're dealing with challenges. So there's the normal challenges, but stress isn't too much. Of those 60 people, how many are going to get better? Every fucking one of them, right? So it's not that our genes are that much different. It's that our environment is. So if we want to start searching for the things that are causing these problems, like the menstrual cycles, like the headaches, we got to stop with what's wrong with me. And we got to start with what's wrong with my environment. What's causing me to my genes to express poorly? Because by the time your genes are expressing poorly, that's too late. That's your body's cry for help. It's a cry for you to change your environment. You should give the hot and cold thing. The hot and cold.
So the game where you play hot and cold with a kid and you hide something in a room and then you direct them to find that object by saying, oh, you're hot, you're close to it, you're on fire. And then they know they're at the spot at the location of the object. So I tell my girls, and it's just like that in nature. Okay. So if you have good energy, if you have a sex drive, if you're alert, if you're focused, if you're happy, if you're skinny, right? All of those things is nature's way of telling you you're hot. You're on the money. You are in the right spot. Your environment is perfect. Stay there. When you're tired, when you're fatigued, when you're fat, when your
menstrual cycles are crazy.
Yeah. When you have all these autoimmune conditions, your thyroid's tanked. It's the wrong environment for you. There's something, whether it's the food you're eating, the supplements you're taking, the prescriptions you're taking, the light you're around, the temperature you're in, all of that is affecting your body all the time.
We didn't adapt to live in a cave that is synthetic with synthetic light. Like this isn't where our genes came from. Humans appeared 200 to 300,000 years ago, right? Not in this room. We were out in nature, right? And when you go back out in nature, these things clear up. I mean, look at MS, multiple sclerosis. It almost doesn't exist at the equator. I mean, that doesn't tell you something, right? It's not you that's broken; it's your environment.
You guys were mentioning, earlier that nutrition ranks pretty high on your list. What kind of nutrition? And I'm sure maybe it's individualized a little bit, but as you were saying, like we're probably all pretty similar. So what do you recommend in terms of nutrition so people don't get it twisted on whether you're carnivore or keto or where you stand?
Can I start with this?
Yeah.
So because I love the position versus interest conversation. So I think a lot of people pick a position. Almost everybody picks a position. I'm of this or I'm of that or I'm of this. And we are a do what fucking works avors, right? So when something changes and we need to adapt, we'll adapt. We don't pick a position because when you pick a position, if something comes up and then something's wrong with that position and you've identified with it, you are incentivized to ignore it. And that's bullshit. That's not scientific. That's not the scientific way. The scientific way is to keep an open mind and question everything. Right? Right now, the evidence eloquently aligns with eating a shit ton more meat. Whether that means you're a carnivore or a ketovore, you dabble between this, you dabble between that. Those are the high hanging fruit. That's not the shit we should be talking about, right? Our genes, our environment is best when we eat meat, mostly meat. Doesn't have to be all of it. It can be all of it. There's a lot, people get really focused on the wrong question, right? And the right question is what kind of environment should I live in? And when you go down that path of, well, I'm a carnivore or I'm a ketovore or I'm a vegetarian or I'm a vegan, you defend that position to your end because you've identified with it. So we do not identify with a diet or a simple way of being. It's always going to be more complicated than that, right? So I always start with that because that's the scientific way, and so that's what we follow. We got to be dynamic. We got to be thoughtful here, right? So now she's the expert in telling you how we are,
how I believe. Yeah, I mean it's so true. But Tom and I talk about this all night. But the thing is humans are opportunistic. That's what it comes down to. We just are very opportunistic. That's why we are the apex predator. We just are. And people get on my feed and they're like, oh, humans are omnivores. It's bullshit. So are dogs right now because you're feeding your fucking carnivore dog sweet potatoes and it's dog food. Okay? So dogs are carnivores and you're feeding it an omnivore diet. Okay? So bears are omnivores, right? And they're in the canine family. So yes, do I believe humans are carnivores? Absolutely. Can we go eat other stuff? Absolutely, because we're opportunistic. We find opportunity. It's all about survival. That's why I go back to insulin constantly, because insulin's a survival hormone. It is a master fat-storing survival hormone. So it all centers around that. But yes, we do way better on meat, and that should be natural. You should feel that naturally, because doesn't everybody's mouth water when they walk by a freaking piece of meat cooking over an open fire? I mean, my mouth is watering right now just thinking about it, right? So yes, it is, you can choose to be vegan. And if you're in the sun and you're at the equator and you're like, yeah, I just want to eat mangoes today, then do that. That's, for some reason, you need that, right? But if you're living in Montana and you're eating 200, 300 grams of protein a day because that's what fuels you and you like it, like Parks and Rec, Ron on Parks and Rec, right? Like Ron Swanson just eats meat. Like, that's it. Don't question what you want if it's in the parameters of nature. Now, there's many things that can make us be off, like the fragrances and the chemicals and the plastics. So we make bad decisions and we're addicted to all the chemicals in the food. But ultimately, most humans I've ever met want to eat meat.
So I want to address the rebuttal that we always get to that argument, which is, well, yeah, but how, if that's true, why can I be addicted to drugs? Why can I be addicted to sugar? Because if you think about where we came from, again, human ingenuity has allowed us to override the natural governing mechanisms of drugs. Right? We're ingenious, we're opportunistic, and we're really intelligent. Now we can synthesize drugs. We can quickly grow sugar. Right. So we have to name drop him again because he is right. It is no longer survival of the fittest. It's the survival of the wisest. And Jack says that. And it's true because we need to simulate adversity, right? Humans thrive in adversity. We look at what we did during COVID, right? We are so bored that our society created a fake problem because we crave adversity and challenge that much. So we don't thrive if there's not a challenge, right? Humans need that. That's just because back in the day, again, primal life, right? We would have challenges. We'd have to go on a hunt. We'd have to solve things. Humans want to solve things. We're naturally, that's our physiological desire is to solve things. So now we need to simulate that. We do that for our kids. We have meetings with our kids and if I see one of them and I'm thinking like, shit, like you need an adversity right now. Like our son, Robert, he's the freaking smartest kid and he's so creative, but sometimes he gets a little lazy and we love him, but he gets a little lazy. So if we need to introduce something to his environment for him to overcome something, to give him the drive himself to become less lazy, we'll do that. And so we did for a while was we did like a boot camp. Where we simulated an environment that was a little bit more hardship for him. Mm-hmm. And we gave him some of those natural drivers. Like, back in the wild, when they were a 15-year-old kid, like that kid would be kicked out of the house, right? That kid would have to go survive. And that test of the nature would cause that kid to mature, right? And now what happens when kids are 15 at home, right? They're downstairs on TikTok playing fucking Call of Duty all day. So they're not getting, and that's why we have a bunch of baby ass adults now. Right? Because we no longer are facing adversities like we should. And the smart parents, like this goes all the way back into like our parenting philosophy is smart parents are the ones that are taking control of their kids' environment even in the way that we introduce adversity into their life and make shit kind of hard for them sometimes. Because if we don't make it hard, life's going to make it hard.
What's an example of that?
What do you have? Do you have one in mind of an adversity that we've done recently?
Well, we don't give our kids the answers. Mm-hmm. We let them try to figure it out. We're not just there like our 9-year-old son Grafton's doing this huge Lego thing, right? He's got all these and he's trying, he can't literally physically fit the piece where it needs to go. And he brings it to his dad like, I need help. Mm-hmm. We're like, no, you don't, dude, figure it out.
Yeah.
Like find a tool to make it work, do something where most parents are just like, I don't want to hear it anymore. I'll just do it. I'll just do it for them. Mm-hmm. And that's not doing well for us right now. You got these millennials who have had all these parents that are just, I just want to go on with my day and don't want to listen to you, have to try to figure shit out. So I'm just going to do it for you. And so now we have all these millennials who don't want to work. They don't want to do anything. They just want to sit in their phones and they think they're entitled to, having this life of luxury.
But in our household, like with simulating adversities, what it looks like is a lot of times is, when they come to us with a problem, that's the conversation. It's okay. So let's compare this to what this challenge would be like into the wild. And then I'm not going to give you an answer. I'm going to ask you a shitload of questions. And I'm going to make you realize what you need to do. And what you need to do typically, it's going to be something that they wouldn't have thought of on their own, but it's the Socratic method, right? Like it's the same thing we do with our clients. It's the more answers you give to people, the bigger the problem becomes because then they just want the answers. It's the teaching to fish versus giving the fish, right? So simulating adversities to me is drawing a metaphor, a comparison, or an analogy to modern problems and going, okay, what would this problem have been like when you were 14 out in the wild 5,000 years ago, right? And so our son Robert being lazy, yeah, I mean, he lives in a comfortable, warm house. He doesn't have, the challenges of needing to hunt. He doesn't have to provide for his wife, because we're living in the modern world. But so what did we do? Well, we made him go out and run in the cold. And we're not like, this isn't like child abuse. It wasn't like, hey, like we're not allowed inside. I'm making you sleep outside with the wolves. Like it wasn't like that. It was, okay, like we're going to do cold showers now. You're going to do push-ups. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. It's going to be a little boot camp and you're going to get some of that environmental impact of a challenge. Yeah. And then when they overcome that challenge, their confidence levels soar. Oh, yeah. Robert, our son, I mean, at 17 and a half years old, has the ability to adapt dynamically in a way that I see in no kids that are 17. None. I can't find a kid that's we'll get on the phone with him. He edits our reels for us. And I can now, he's gotten so good over the last 4 years that I've been working with him that I can talk to him for 20 minutes and he knows exactly what I'm saying. He knows exactly what to do. He feels he is constructive. And he has a booming confidence about himself. Mm-hmm. And that confidence then is what carries forward, right? Because I made life a little bit difficult for him by not giving him the answer.
Yeah.
For the month of April, you're going to receive 25% off all Vivo Barefoot shoes. And Nsima, can you tell us why these shoes are so great?
For years on this podcast, we've been talking about the benefit of barefoot shoes. And these are the shoes I used to use back in like 2017, 2018. My old Metcons. They are flat, but they're not very wide and they're very stiff and they don't move. That's why we've been partnering with and we've been using Vivo Barefoot shoes. These are the Modus Strength shoe because not only are they wide, I have wide ass feet and so do we here on the podcast, especially as our feet have gotten stronger, but they're flexible. So when you're doing certain movements, like let's say you're doing jumping or you're doing split squats or you're doing movements where your toes need to flex and move, your feet are able to do that and perform in this shoe, allowing them to get stronger over time. And obviously, they're flexible. So your foot's allowed to be a foot. And when you're doing all types of exercise, your feet will get stronger, improving your ability to move. Andrew, how can they get their hands on these?
Yes, and for the month of April, you're going to receive 25% off all of your Vivo Barefoot shoes. That is a limited time deal for the month of April only. So if you've been waiting for the perfect time to buy your Vivo Barefoot shoes, now is that time. Head over to vivobarefoot.com/powerproject, enter the code for April, and receive 25% off your entire order. Link is in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
Mm-hmm. Can I go back to something that like brings a lot of people adversity? Because I want us to go into this a little bit more. You mentioned getting rid of coffee, right? Mm-hmm. We just kind of mentioned why it's bad, but we didn't go into why it's bad. So how is this negatively affecting men and women's hormones? Why should people get rid of it?
Yeah. So I did a coffee reel and everybody shit a brick. They were like, what? I'm unfollowing you now.
You know, and I want to mention this too. Like I read this book, I think it was, I forgot the name of it, but it went into all like how there's so much research backing coffee. So I think when you tell people not to drink coffee, there's all of this literature, right? And you even have fucking, who's the biohacker guy? What's his name?
Asprey.
Right? He'll pull up all the studies to why coffee is good for you and how it helps with Alzheimer's and all this shit,
But the second that it comes down to medicine, they won't point to the studies because they'll be like, they're all funded by pharma, right? So it's like they're just fucking hypocrites, right? Because they'll go, well, look at the studies when it supports my thing, but when it doesn't, don't fucking look at the studies. You know, it's like Jesus, you guys.
What happened with Dave? What happened with Dave Asprey? Because I remember when Dave first hit the scene, and he had mold toxicity. That's his story, and so he had to find a coffee that was mold free because coffee holds a lot of mold. And his body just couldn't tolerate the mold anymore. So he had to find a mold-free coffee. And so that's what he ended up doing. And that's where he got to be that big bulletproof coffee guy because he was trying to heal his problem with his mold toxicity. So, you know, anytime you mix money into anything, you're going to have incentives that way. But
if you look at the lobby or the who funds the coffee studies, just it's, I mean, everybody right now is talking about the vaccine, right? And they're going, well, you know, who's funding all the vaccine literature? So people are aware of this idea of the conflict of interest, but then they are unable, they have their blinders on and they're unable to think that it applies in a different industry. And it doesn't. It's the same thing. In the coffee industry, it's the same thing. In the alcohol industry, it's the same thing. A glass of wine a night is good for you. Bullshit. It's the same thing. Right. So this idea, like we got to learn as humans we got to figure out when we can extrapolate. And when you comes to the large sample size, which is where these studies are in and these lobbyists and the funding, that's a large sample size. You can extrapolate the same shit that happens in medicine to coffee, to alcohol, to everything. Right. So step one is, remember, always back, primal way. There's going to be conflicting studies. There's going to be shit out there. But did our ancestors have a Starbucks? Could our ancestors walk into a Caribou Coffee and get a freaking 16-ounce double espresso caramel macchiato?
But coffee is a few hundred years old, right?
Okay,
Like,
so coffee
so now let's talk about the other side.
Yeah, and we did sort of survive on coffee and alcohol, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Well, because you can burn those as energy, right? Like, so coffee's a drug and alcohol's ethanol, and your Krebs cycle can burn ethanol, like it just can. But ultimately, the coffee interrupts the adenosine. The adenosine is so important for your body to heal. When you get that feeling around 2:00 and you're like, okay, I'm feeling really tired. That's your adenosine getting into its receptor site, wanting to slow you down. And the reason is because our nervous system sometimes need a reboot, especially if we've been producing a lot of ATP. So the more ATP you produce, the more adenosine you make. So if you have that, you see kids, they're running around like crazy, right? Their little heads are spinning off and they produce a lot of ATP. And then they produce a lot of adenosine. And so then they crash and they take a nap. Okay. It's the same for us. If we have a very mind active job, which is, your mitochondria is in your brain and your heart. It's everywhere in your body, but we hold most of it in our brain and our heart. That's where we have the highest mitochondrial load. And if you have a real brain heavy job where you have to think a lot, you're going to produce a lot of ATP. So therefore, you're going to need to reset your nervous system. You're going to need to just unplug, just like you have to unplug your computer, right? So coffee is a drug. There's no question. It is an absolute drug. And, the coffee lobbyists, there's big money in that. But what's the bigger money in? Keeping you drugged? Because if you're drugged, what else do you need? You need more drugs. You will watch whatever they're showing you on the blue lit screen and do whatever they tell you to do. Right? So coffee, coffee's easy for them. It's cheap. That's why it's so cheap. You can get coffee anywhere.
If you went to an MRI after you drank coffee, the oxygen to your brain goes down by 40%. So, and it affects your area of like judgment and so you become easier to control. Now, again, no, but this thing isn't like, this isn't a black and white conversation, right? We live in a world of gray. It doesn't mean you can't ever have coffee. And that's not the argument. It's at least know and understand the basis and the arguments on both sides.
Careful with the dose.
Yeah, well, that's a big part of it too. If you have 20, 30, 40 milligrams of caffeine every day, like it probably isn't going to be that big of a deal. But like we're in a world where we're like people are drinking like 4 freaking grande Starbucks that are like hyper caffeinated. Yeah. And then they would come to Candi to see her in person and they'd be like, well, I feel like this and this and this, and I'm always anxious. And it's like, holy shit, you guys, you're drinking like 4 fucking coffees. And I'm not going to put you on a supplement. Drink more fucking water and stop drinking so much coffee.
And your last one's at like 4 p.m.
Yeah. No. And they're not sleeping for shit. And it's like, you guys, okay.
There's people that have anxiety and they consume a lot of caffeine and then they go to the doctor and they get prescribed something else.
Yes.
It's like, maybe we should have just sat here for a moment and talked about this caffeine, pull that back and see if symptoms get better. Right?
Well, because again, you're not broken.
That's such an amazing point that I want to make right now is the consultation between the physician and the patient. I was a hairdresser prior to being a nutritionist. And so consultation in hairdressing is the most important thing, right? Because we got shoulder length here and then shoulder length here. So you can do, I want my hair shoulder length, which is right here, or I want my hair shoulder length, which is like a bob length, right? So you have to learn how to really communicate. And I think all doctors should have to understand this. The art of consultation is where it all is they're not asking the right questions.
There's nothing funnier than when your friend gets a bad haircut.
Yeah.
And you're like, bro, like what's going on with that?
Bad consultation. That's why they get put on all these drugs.
They cut off too much, man. I don't know.
Like, glad you're having fun.
It's the time thing, though. It's unfortunate that like they don't have more time to spend with these patients. It's easier to be like, you have this, and you give you this. So it's like, can you blame them? Like you got to blame them, but it
yes. The thing that I blame them for is not standing up and saying no. I'm not doing a 5-minute appointment. No. And that's what's happened is they're all now involved in centralized medicine where they have to do 5-minute appointments. Yeah. Back in the day, my childhood doctor could do a 30-minute appointment with us because he wasn't centralized. He wasn't owned by the hospital or the governing agencies around. He did his own practice. So we need these doctors to remove themselves out of the centralized system and get their own practices back so that they can control the kind of care that their patients get.
Would you guys say it's fair that it's very difficult to like point the finger at one thing that's causing someone's ailment or disease? In your case with type 1 diabetes, I don't think there's a lot of information or research that we really truly know exactly where it comes from. It's like some people are like, oh, I got this vaccine. Some people say they may have been triggered from something else. Right? Yeah. And do you guys kind of feel that way in general? Like when somebody comes to you with whatever it is that they have, it's like you probably can't always just pin stuff down to like one thing. It's probably a multitude of things.
I mean, that's the human brain looks for patterns and to make things simple, right? That's our again, a physiological response to adapting to an environment where we got to survive, right? So we look for patterns and we try to make things simple. And so what happens is you get sick. Well, it's just this one thing. You know, it's the knee-jerk reaction of humans is to go, well, it's just this one thing. It's just this one variable. If anybody tells you really it's any one thing ever, like they're lying to you because nobody really knows. There's so many variables You know, I mean, whether you're breathing this air over there or that over there, you know, there might be plastic or there might be mold over here. There's too many variables, right? So again, this always goes back to I'm just this like guy that just keeps kicking the dead horse. Is like you got to look to the environment, because you can't. We get women that are like, well, I want to know if this is going to help me with this and if it's going to help me with that. It's like, nobody fucking knows the answer to that. You're asking the wrong question. I mean, I love you and I want you to get better. I really do. Like, I want people to be healthy. Why we're here right now, why we're doing our program is because we want to see this civilization get healthier and take the power back so that our kids can live in a world that's not so freaking crazy, right? But in order to do that, we got to ask that better question, which is like, why is my body doing this, right? Why is my body having this problem? Now, like there's some rare exceptions, right? Like type 1 diabetes, it probably is an environmental thing, but again, that one could be genetic. My grandpa on my maternal side is type 1 diabetic, or was type 1 diabetic. He passed away, but it's the knee-jerk reaction of people to go, I think it's just this one thing, and it rarely is. It rarely is, right, honey?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Also, Jack says this, and this is the first time I ever heard this. I couldn't believe it. My mind was completely blown. But he talks about physics and how we're operating research is it Newtonian, honey? Newtonian physics. And what the actuality is, we live in quantum physics where everything is energy, right? And so in quantum physics, it's the eye of the beholder, right? Mm-hmm. That you manifest what whoever's watching, right? So you have to think about the research and how it's coming forward and how we are manifesting the research in ways that we are, because that you can't take quantum physics out of the mix. It's part, we know that now. Einstein came and blew everybody away.
And there is no such thing as cause and effect.
We're still using the old system for research. And it's just, if you think about that, your mind kind of explodes a little bit, because you're like, wait, it's all the beholder then. It's all in the eye of the beholder. So is there any real research? Because is this why you can find, healthy vegans? Is this why you can find this and that? And ultimately, there hasn't been enough time. Agriculture's 10,000 years old. There has not been enough time for us to know the answers to these questions. And what's really in charge, like I said at the beginning, is the sun. The sun is dictating everything in our environment. So we won't know. It's like the book Ishmael. Have you guys read that book, Ishmael?
No.
Oh, it's so good. I think everybody should read it. It's a fiction book. But in the book, it's a gorilla who is talking to this journalist. I believe he's a journalist, telepathically. So he's having a telepathic communication. And that's what the whole book is. And his message to humanity and culture is that humans think they're outside of the fabric of nature. And we're not. We are part of it. But because we have this conscious part of ourselves, we can manipulate it easily. And I think we're realizing now that's not necessarily such a good thing. But he says in the book, it's like if we were to jump out of an airplane with a parachute packed and our parachute is broken, it's not going to open, but we don't know that yet. And we're coming closer and closer to the ground thinking everything's just great. We're going to pull the parachute and it's just going to open. Everything's going to be fine. And then it's not. Our parachute's really broken and we don't know that yet. That's where we're at in humanity. We don't know that our parachute isn't going to open yet. We haven't hit the ground. Nature will tell us, and it's getting close because what's happening? We're not procreating like we should. Infertility rates are through the roof. Girls can't get pregnant. They need support now. Young men and women need support to get pregnant. That's nature's first sign of telling you your fucking parachute is not going to open.
Well, with the infertility thing, because I know you guys probably have worked with women in that. So if people are having issues conceiving, right, what are things that they can do? And also, some people go to doctors, a woman's like maybe 36, 37, and they're like, you're over the hump, you're over the hill. It's no chance for you at this point. Do you see that there's an upper limit, or what have you guys been able to do?
Yeah, we work with a lot of girls who can't get pregnant, and I just tell them exactly what Tom says. It's your environment. It's your environment. So let's start working with it instead of against it and see what happens. Remove all the toxic chemicals first. Check number 1. Start eating more in accordance with your circadian hormones. Let insulin do what it's supposed to do. And then once they start doing those things, they start seeing changes in their cycle. They start regulating. Everything's doing really well. And then all of a sudden, poof, they're pregnant, baby. That's just how it works. Nature rewards you when you're doing the right thing.
And as long as the dude's doing it too, because right, like
there's
plenty of that shit.
seriously,
Yeah, there's some
100%.
And I tell girls a lot of the times, because I see this so frequently, is women blame themselves, and I'm like, "Have you had your bro checked?" And
Even
they're
the
like,
way I asked the question, it's like,
they're like, "Yeah, his morphology is low," and I'm like, "Dude needs more meat. You got to give him more meat. He needs B12, because if you don't have B12, you're not going to morph that baby, and then you won't keep it in your system. You will abort." And so they understand when they get in how important, because it is just as much the guy as it is the woman.
How do we get rid of toxins? Because like that seems like a tough one. And then like what's toxic?
80-20, man.
We're talking about blue light, and then we got like plastics, and then you got
some of it,
EMF,
bad.
RMF.
I know. Some of it you can't.
ABC, LMNOP.
Yeah.
Some of it you can't.
Totally.
Like plastic, that is not going to be removed from our environment for hundreds of years, even if we did everything right now. Because it's floating in the air.
Just do the best
the
you
fibers. Do the best thing. 80-20. So should somebody be panicked about breathing the plastic? Well, like that's, first of all, you can't control that. B, like that's probably not where you're getting your greatest exposure, right? So you gotta you look to I think of things sometimes in terms of time, right? So where do you spend your most time, right? In your bed, most likely, right? A third of your life is in your bed. So are you sleeping on a nice on a mattress organic mattress that's not off-putting chemicals, right? And is your room full of EMFs, non-native EMFs? So, I mean, the EMF thing is really interesting too, because that's another toxic conversation, and it's invisible. So people think it's not real, and holy shit, when you get the meters, we have all the pro meters. We went through our house, and
how do you get the meters? Like something you just order off Amazon?
You can get them on Amazon. I'm sure when you do the podcast, you could pop them up. There's one that's called a tri-field, which is like, it's like the one, it does all three, but it's not great at all three, but it's good enough, like 80-20 of the all three. And so the best thing to do, like if you don't have the money to buy the meter, which is only like a couple $100, but if you don't have the money to buy the meter, there's like two things you can do that are just like 80-20 of your EMFs. And then we'll talk rest about the other toxins. Get your bed away from the wall. Because your walls, that's it. That's the tri-field. That will go between, there's three fields. There's electric field, there's a magnetic field, and then there's radio frequencies. So there's different consequences of each type of field, but those are the three toxic kinds of EMFs, and those are non-native. Now remember, there are native EMFs that come off like volcanoes, which are good for the body, positive,
and
favorable,
sun,
and the sun, exactly. Yeah. But so get your bed, if you don't know and you don't have one of those meters, get your bed a foot to 2 feet away from the wall, especially if you live in an old house, because there's wires and shit being run behind there. And literally these fields, the majority of these fields go from a foot to like 3 feet at the most. Your refrigerator is a big son of a bitch. That's a huge field that comes off that thing. And fans. We've tested fans, and for some reason, fans throw these freaking huge fields off of them.
All fans?
Yeah, fans. Like ceiling fans, floor fans.
But again, it might only be a couple feet.
It might only be a couple feet, but maybe don't sleep under one that's running. Like maybe use something else for that. But anyway, so get your bed away from the wall and turn your Wi-Fi off at night. Those are your two big ones that are just easy to control. 80-20, you're going to get 80% of the reduction with 20% of the work by doing those two things. That's what I believe. That's what we've done in our testing. And then toxins, right? It's kind of the same thing. So, you get.
Well, what about turning the breaker off? We turn our breaker off in our room at night. We just shut the whole power off.
You go downstairs, you figure out your circuit breaker.
How do you guys have communication with your children at that point? Like, can they get a hold of you in some way with the phone or something?
Yeah, we just put your phone in the other room. Yeah, you put your phone in the other room.
We put it in the bathroom, and it's fine. It's far enough away.
The field again on that is only coming off 2-3 feet. When you get one of those meters, it empowers you, because it's a boogeyman until you know what it is, right? So you gotta clarify the problem. Like Einstein's quote, right? Like, if I could fix any problem, what would I do? 95% of your time should be clarifying the problem, and 5% should be solving it, right? If you don't know the problem, clarify it first. If you need to clarify it, get one of the meters, right? And then you'll know. But the field that comes off a phone is like a foot or 2 feet. Right, it's not the hugest thing. So get that thing out of your room at night, and then you're good, right? So you don't have to worry about that. But then shut your circuit breaker off at night, because it shuts all the power off to all of the outlets in your room, and the outlets are spraying off dirty electricity like crazy, right? So why
about air conditioning or heat, or like all that gets shut off too?
No, we just shut off our room. We just shut off the in our room, because remember if the AC's, it depends on where your AC is, right? If your AC's right outside the room of your bedroom and it's like on the other side of it, okay, yeah, that might be a problem. right? So again, in that situation, go get a tri-field meter and measure it and make sure that you're doing good. But, if you live in a house that's relatively new and you don't want to buy a meter, just get your bed away from the wall and turn your Wi-Fi breaker or Wi-Fi off at night, because you don't need it on anyway. What the hell is the point of having it on? And then go shut your circuit breaker off in your room. And like, honestly, when we did that, we started sleeping way better. Really? That was a really big change.
Yeah. And the grounding sheets, talk about the grounding sheets.
Oh, well, the grounding sheets. So grounding sheets are an interesting thing too, because it's not this black and white thing where you want to be grounded at night, because if, it depends on the connection that you make to the ground. Because if you make a dirty connection with the ground, you're getting dirty energy up in your grounding sheets. So, the plug, when they get a 3-prong plug and the bottom piece is the grounding piece. Well, if that is running through your home and being interfered with by a bunch of electricity, then if you plug your grounding sheet into that dirty electricity is coming through into your grounding sheets. So the gold standard for grounding sheets is actually to run a wire outside of your window so it doesn't touch anything in your house, and then you run it outside and you ground it outside. Right? So you don't run it into your outlet, right? Like
a copper wire or something.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah, and then you run it right, like you don't let it touch anything, because
I know some people listening are like, "Oh my God, these guys!" Like,
I know.
But if you have symptoms, and you test,
Yeah.
Well, and a
you
lot
test
of people,
the room, like and you're in a compromised position.
Yeah.
If you're compromised enough, you'll do and try anything.
I know,
and
it
a lot of
sucks.
people buy these gimmicky things where they're like, "Oh, grounding sheets," and then they just make it worse.
Well, they're doing
like-
is they're solving the problem without clarifying it. Right? They went to the solve the problem stage and not the clarifying it stage. They didn't figure out what the problem really was. They didn't figure out the problem might also be inside of the house. So they solved it with a bad solution. Right? So yeah, I mean, again, we weren't designed. You remember, we didn't evolve in an environment that we should be managing this stuff, but unfortunately we live in one. So it's the survival of the wisest now, not the survival of the fittest. We have to be wise. We have to know where our things are. So EMFs are a big part of the toxic conversation. But then also sense fabrics. Don't be spraying Glade. Don't be using bullshit laundry detergents and fabric softeners and all that shit. Get that shit gone. Check your couch. If you're laying on your couch a lot, try to get an organic couch if you can. Maybe, right?
An organic couch.
Organic, yeah, because they off gas. I mean, this stuff is everywhere. Your car is an EMF
Leather,
disaster.
leather, cotton,
Yeah,
things that are
right.
natural,
Natural
as
material.
much as you possibly
wherever you can. And then once you do that, then your next thing that you can do, your next actionable item is to make your body detox better, right? Because now I've 80-20'd my toxic life. Now I need to make my 80-20 my ability to get this shit out of me. So stop drinking coffee, drink more water, because then you flush more, right?
Make sure you're pooping.
Make sure you're
Sit in
pooping.
the
Get rid of the
sauna.
toxic fat. Get in the sun, because it'll help you detox.
The
right?
sun
All
is
of these things.
the sun is great for detoxing. So
Protein is great for detoxing too.
protein.
And when you guys say detoxing, I don't want to cut you out, but you were going on protein. But when you guys say detoxing, some people listening are like, "Oh, that's a buzzword." Like, no, they're saying detox. So what do you guys mean when you say detox?
Good question.
Getting the things that are harming you out of your body. It's as simple as it is.
Okay.
Take the toxin and remove it. So the sun is your best heavy metal detox you can do, because melanin will detoxify heavy metals. And a lot of times that when women get sunspots, or even men get sunspots, it's the metal coming out into the surface, because melanin needs to go there and clean up the mess. So I have all these girls come in and they've done thousands of dollars on these chelating heavy metal therapy treatments, and they're not getting any progress. They're getting sicker and they're spending all this money. And I'm like, just get your butt in the sun. Like, you need to move down, get into the sun and be in the sun all the time and create melanin, and then their problems go away. So nature provides all of the detoxification, cellular autophagy, just fast. Get into the heat, get your body really hot, go sweat in the sun, go into a sauna if you don't have the sun, like sweating is a great way to detoxify. You don't need supplements to detoxify.
And the idea that the detox is a buzzword, a lot of these toxins exist in nature too. So our bodies needed to adapt to get rid of them. Yeah. So we have detox pathways. That's objectively true, not subjective. Now the whole detox thing, I mean,
people are conditioned to hear detox.
I know, and this is the connotation of the word versus the denotation, right? What does it really mean versus how is it heard by people? And unfortunately, there's it's the same bullshit that the weight loss industry is dealing with. We get these women that are all skeptical because all these people have burned them, and it's just a bunch of bullshit, right? Just because somebody doesn't know what they were doing and they sold you doesn't mean we don't. right? And just because somebody said something about detox that wasn't real doesn't mean all detox is wrong, right? We got to be careful about what conclusions we draw from small sample sizes, right? Because you need a large sample size to statistically draw a statistically significant conclusion. And a lot of people extrapolate improperly, right? So, and the other interesting thing about saunas and detoxing is, and actually this goes back to Jen. And if anybody watching this needs a sauna, you got to just email us, because this woman knows everything about saunas, and we bought one from her and she's the best. When firefighters are some of the most toxic people in this country. And it's because they run into burning fucking buildings. These toxins are in the air. They're even if they're wearing respirators, they're breathing, they're getting them in. And when they go into a sauna and they come out and they wipe their arms down, it's gray. So the idea that we don't detox is just nonsense, right? It's just because you don't see it and feel it doesn't mean it's not there. And a lot of body odor is just you detoxing, because our bodies shouldn't stink as bad as some people's body. Why does some people's body odor get real bad? Right?
This guy doesn't smell, by the way.
Okay.
Like, he never smells,
Well, he's
no
clean.
matter
You're
what.
clean on the inside, you know?
That's part of my nickname. That's from two mean older brothers.
Why am I wearing these right now? It's because I'm being bathed in blue light. And we've actually learned from not just these guests, but multiple guests on our podcast that blue light isn't bad for you, but it's when you're getting your blue light and where you're getting your blue light from. That's why we've partnered with EMR Tech. They have blue light day blocking glasses. If you're in front of screens or if you're in front of a lot of artificial light, these are going to be great to use then. And then we have blue light nighttime glasses. When it's nighttime and you have to be in front of your screen, or whether you have to be on your laptop, these are the glasses that you want to use when the sun sets. Using these glasses in the evening is going to help you have better sleep quality, because you're not getting bombarded with so much blue light at a time when you shouldn't be getting bombarded with that light. But also, EMR Tech has some of the best red light therapy devices on the market. They have smaller devices and they also have large devices. The cool thing about the red light therapy devices is that they actually have a stronger output as far as the red light is concerned. So if you stand in front of one of the EMR Tech devices versus competitors, you'll notice a difference in how powerful the red light coming through the device is. So go ahead and check out EMR Tech. Andrew, how can they save?
Yes, that's over at emrtech.com. That's EMR-TEK.com. And at checkout, enter promo code POWERPROJECT to save 20% off your entire order. Again, that's at emrtech.com, promo code POWERPROJECT. Links in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
What you got, Andrew?
So I have a couple of questions over here, but just because you guys were talking about the sun being like the ultimate detox tool for heavy metals and stuff, and just because I love going on these rabbit holes and all this weird stuff, conspiracy theories, whatever you want to call it, what do we do about like the metals that are potentially in the air?
Yeah. Chemtrails.
Yeah.
Not potentially, absolutely.
I said
objectively
potentially
true.
to protect myself amongst the comments that are probably rolling in right now.
Gosh, I'm sure.
Have no fear.
Well, it's Mount Shasta, which is just not too far away from here. You can say all you want. There's nothing in there, but on Mount Shasta, actually, if you can go into, I think the city is where I last heard about this, but they have the reports of the aluminum that is in the water coming off of Mount Shasta because it's in the air, right? So, and it just gets into the snow melt up there. So, yeah, I mean, that's what Tom was saying. There's plastics we're breathing in right now, and you just have to do your best. And the best thing we can do right now is educate our kids. The next best thing we can do is start saying no, voting with our dollar. I'm a really big believer in you spend your money and you use your money to control, our culture right now.
It's blaming the corporations is a victim mentality, right? The opposite of that is voting with your dollar.
Yeah,
right. If you want to control something, buy the shit that comes from companies that give a shit. That's what you can do.
We believe we could get into politics. Tom's smart enough to do something like that. And we could go in and start, we had girls during COVID that were, against the mandates and whatever. And they had this big organization. What were they called? That
Facebook group.
Anyways, they were going down and meeting at the Capitol every day and, talking to all their political people and making the movement, and they were trying to get us involved, and we're like, you guys, it's all BS. When are you going to learn? It's the same thing, and it happens. Ultimate power corrupts, right? It happened in freaking high school when we had ASB. What always happened? The ASB people always got in charge, and they started making all these stupid rules that everybody else had to follow. It's centralization. Our lives right now are way too centralized. We have to decentralize this. We have to take responsibility in our own backyard and start making changes for ourselves, because you can go, talk to a politician all you want and think, oh yeah, they're on my team. They're not on your team. There's no way. They'll tell you all day they're on your team. And what happens? They're not on your team. So they're going to do what's in their interest, which is in their pocketbook. So what we have to do is vote with our pocketbook. That's where our interest is. Don't spend your money on bullshit items like Febreze and Glade plugins and a plastic bottle of Coke, right? Don't put your money there, because they're just going to make more. We got to put them out of business. That's the only way things are going to change.
So just to really clarify the definition of like the centralizing things that's come up a couple times. It's centralization is when it's one or very few authoritative powers governing the rest. And so the opposite of that is decentralization, where everybody has autonomy. And this metaphor can be drawn so broadly, and it can be applied to so many different situations. So much so that like one of my favorite business books, and I can't think of the name of it right now, introduced the idea of businesses that perform the best, and versus businesses that perform well for a little while and then fail, versus businesses that can continue to perform. And one of the big distinctions was the idea of a general with 1,000 soldiers model, which is a general with 1,000 soldiers, meaning a centralized authority that dictates the control of all of the people, versus the decentralized model where you have a CEO that provides autonomy to everybody in the organization. And every time that one wins. And it's not just business. It's every single thing. It's education. It's your health. It's all of the things. The only thing then in our world that should be a central authority is the sun. It's the only thing that really there's only one authority, that guides everything, but nature is beautifully decentralized. If one plant dies, another plant doesn't. It doesn't care that plant died, right? It's independent. So we need to model after that nature, that decentralization.
There is a clip that I was searching for as we were podcasting. I think I found it. I sent it over to Andrew. Andrew, can you pull this one up? Because I think this is the clip that I saw from you guys that pissed the most people off. It's a clip that I saw so many nutritionists clip and just like talk about.
Tear it apart.
Yeah, so I want us to watch this, and I want us to get some clarification.
Yep.
I hope this is it.
What do we absolutely require for survival? Protein and fat. How are those not ancestral foods? The original apple that has not been genetically engineered, you guys won't want to eat it. The only thing you can do with it is turn it into cider. It has been genetically engineered. The banana that you see in the supermarket, that Cavendish banana, is a recent thing. We genetically engineered that plant to grow that banana. Traditional bananas are very woody and pulpy, and you wouldn't want to eat them. But we've bred them to be sugar bombs. They are not natural. Apples and bananas are actually berries. You know what they did with berries? They turned them into ethanol. They made them into alcohol. That's what we did. That's how we processed them. But we took them, we manipulated them to grow a lot of sugar, and now we grow them. The banana plant cannot reproduce on its own. They have to have a new plant every time. What is nature telling us when that plant cannot produce on its own? What do we require?
So that was actually a good one. That wasn't the one I was looking for, but that's perfect. But there's another clip where you were talking about how like meat is what we need. And you were saying there was no nutritional value in vegetables. And I saw so many individuals in the nutrition sector take that and say, well, there's folate, there's vitamin K, there's vitamin C, right? So I'm curious, obviously when you're talking about this, how should people contextualize it? Like, because they'll hear people say, yeah, there is vitamins and good nutrients in plant foods, but what are you saying?
Yeah. So what is known to be true about that is in appearance, that might be there, but is your body really absorbing that from that plant? So in meat, we absorb everything we need to absorb out of meat. It's in the perfect form for us. But iron, for example, iron's a really good one because you see these anemic girls that are just making these smoothie bombs, right? They're just loading these spinach-fed smoothies into their body, and they can't get their iron levels up. And they're vegan. So that right there in and of itself should tell you those vitamins that are in plants aren't necessarily the vitamins that we can absorb and utilize. Yes, some of them maybe on a very minuscule level we'll get through, especially minerals. But even then, you're not, pumpkin seeds. Who's going to sit around and eat pumpkin seeds and get zinc from pumpkin seeds, right? You're getting that from meat. That is what you're getting. Folate, I've worked with a lot of people with MTHFR, so this is a big one because they need folate. The people that have the genetic mutation with the MTHFR gene, they don't detox well. And so they don't process their B vitamins and turn folic acid into folate. And so you get them eating meat, their bodies start working. Their bodies start processing those things. You see the oxidative stress levels come down. But, to get folic acid out of a synthetic form or out of a vegetable, you're not, good luck. You're just not going to see the needle move anywhere. And so I've worked a lot with people in their blood work. I know exactly what to tell them. Go in and get this done from your doctor. Bring it back to me. Let's look at it. Let's talk about this. You just don't see those numbers move in the right direction unless they're getting it through animal products. The antioxidants that are provided, yes, in the berries, in the season they're in, with the sun growing them the way that where they're supposed to grow, where they're from, is yes, we get antioxidants from that, and it can be beneficial for us, but we don't need it.
Okay. Do you guys eat fruits at all or nah?
No, we, like if I'm in Hawaii or where we're in Puerto Rico and there's some mangoes growing, I did actually have a little bit of an orange and it was bitter. I mean, it was just a
growing
orange
on a tree
growing
in the
tree.
jungle, by the way.
And now you can't really know exactly if those are native because everything's been manipulated now. So you can't know what's actually native to where it's at. And even they have apple bananas growing. We were in a forest in the middle of Puerto Rico in this
Did you say apple bananas? Apple bananas?
Yes.
Yeah,
No,
it's a
there
thing.
are apple bananas.
Okay.
And so we don't know because we weren't there manipulating the seed, at the time it was being manipulated. And this has been going on for thousands of years, seed manipulation. So we don't know what is actually real anymore. What did we manipulate? When did that start? Because humans are innovative.
We
We're
did it
opportunistic.
with a lot of things, even here in the Sacramento, Davis area, there's a lot of trees that aren't native to this area that they grew. And you see on the news every year, they're like, oh, it's allergy season. And then people go out and they get their Allegra and everything. And people don't understand, if you can just go outside, start getting used to, what's here. But unfortunately, trees probably aren't supposed to be here. And a lot of us maybe aren't supposed to be in this location. So
I know
That's
people get really, really excited about the notion of GMO. They get all up in arms about this idea of genetically modified. And then they have that particular one that we did watch. People are like, well, that's not GMO. That's genetically engineering. And that's a huge difference. And it's like, yeah, but you guys, that's not the point. You're missing the point. The idea, the thing is that our genes, our DNA didn't adapt to an environment where humans were so fucking ingenious that we were able to genetically engineer anything, or even thoughtfully crossbreed plants. We just posted that would really answer this. We just posted a post yesterday on Instagram. It was just a picture post, and basically it says we while we were roaming, while we were hunting, we might have come across a bush of berries, and we probably stuffed our face with them, right? But we didn't find a Jamba Juice and carb load on a acai bowl with granola and honey. That's not how the way it works. And let's go to the second page of that. So, and then the truth isn't convenient doesn't mean it's not the truth. Your desire for sugar is a physiological response to increase your odds of survival in a world with a natural governing mechanism, i.e., which is glucose's natural sparse presence in the wild. Glucose was naturally very sparse, hard to get, right? But in today's world, where that governing mechanism, that scarcity, that was a governing mechanism, right? That scarcity was it was very important. It was a safety valve, right? Our human ingenuity has overridden that. We've outgoverned ourselves. We've gotten to a point where that's not a governing mechanism anymore. And so now it's taken that craving for glucose, which is just a survival mechanism, right? Because in nature, if you fatten up a little bit from glucose, great. If you find a freaking a beehive full of honey and you can get that honey, get it, because you will fatten up a little bit and it increases your odds for survival. But how often were you running across a bunch of honey? How often were you really climbing the tree and battling the bees? Right? How often were you seeing the bush of berries? How often were you, that stuff didn't grow in plots and farms like it does today.
Another good point that I love this, making this point, because I'm a big Survivor fan. I love Survivor. I've loved it since day one. And we were watching one of the newer shows, and they had a survival challenge. And the kids, they were like 20, all of them were about 23 years old. There was 3 of them on the team. And they won the challenge. They were so excited. They got to choose between chicken and vegetables or cake, cookies, and ice cream. Okay. And so here they are, these 3 scrawny little kids, and they're like day 20.
Yeah, they're into it. Like, they're hungry.
They're hungry. And they're just sitting there, and Jeff's like, okay, what did you guys choose? And all 3 of them at the same time, chicken. Like they went straight for the meat. And the thing, I tell my girls this because I believe too, there's an order of meat, right? Like some is better than others. So if you're out in the woods and you have a bow and arrow, and you have 1 arrow and you can take a shot, no matter what, you're going to hit the animal you shoot. Let's just say, for the sake of saying, you're going to kill it. And you see a deer and you could kill the deer, or there's a chicken and you could kill a chicken from a ways away. Which one are you going to get? And they always go the deer. I'm like, why'd you pick that one? I'm like, well, because I like the taste of the deer better and it's more meat. And I'm like, exactly.
Wait, your kids have had deer meat. Good for them.
Yeah.
The venison. Yeah, it's good.
No, my dad is a hunting and fishing guide in the Olympic Peninsula. So I grew up in Forks, Washington, which is where all the Twilight magical stuff is. They hate it out there with the Twilight stuff. But he's a hunting and fishing guide. So I grew up hunting and fishing. I grew up shooting a bow. I grew up fly fishing in my driveway, practicing, like he was a 3rd generation rancher. So I had grass-fed beef. So it was a really, really, awesome thing for us as kids. But yeah, ultimately you have to just go. If you go outside more often, if you just spend most of your time outside, you will get the intuitive knowledge you need to make a decision on what to eat. You will learn your environment. The thing is we're not outside. We're completely disconnected from nature. Animals know when they have parasites, and they know which plant to go eat. How do they know that? They're driven by those electromagnetic fields that are in everything.
I'm curious about this because obviously you guys are wearing the glasses. How about red light therapy devices? Because it's something that we've talked about on the podcast before, and you guys use these things. How are they beneficial? Because a lot of people still think it's a fad, that it doesn't really do much.
Oh, have you ever stood in front of we have the Firehawk.
Can I first start with just like the premise of red light and infrared light?
Absolutely.
Right. So have you guys heard of exclusion zone water?
No,
or the 4th phase of water?
I haven't.
Okay, so there's a book called The 4th Phase of Water. And if you do one thing this year, read that book. It will blow your fucking mind about just the truth of life around you. So there is a 4th phase of water, and it is not liquid, it is not vapor, and it is not solid. So it's not ice, steam, or liquid water. It is a 4th phase. It's a structured kind of water, and it exists in your intracellular matrix. And just hold on, because I know you're going to talk about the mitochondria in a second. So just hold that thought, because you're better at talking that part. So this water exists in your cells, and it structures, and when it structures, it allows your cell signaling. I mean, this is one thing. It allows your cells to signal better. It's how your nerves send the signals through this very specific 4th phase of water. Do you know that Novocaine and lidocaine, they work because they kill exclusion zone water, and so they stop the signaling of your nerves to your brain, and that's why you get numb with Novocaine and lidocaine.
Oh.
So that's its mechanism.
And this water is, it's like thick, right?
It's
like
viscous.
It's
gel-like.
viscous. Yes,
right?
yes, exactly. And it will structure to certain layers thick, right? So why do all these guys tell you to go out in the sun in the morning? Because the infrared radiation from the sun quickly and sustainably builds your exclusion zone water, which is extremely favorable for not only your cell health in your body, but then it triggers all the circadian biology in your body to start the day. So the red light is, if you think about the spectrum of the sun as it goes from sun up to sundown, right? In the beginning of the day is when it's the highest percentage of red and the least amount of blue. And then as you get to noon, you have the greatest amount of blue. It doesn't mean you don't have any red. It just means you have the greatest amount of blue. And then as you go back, it goes in reverse order. But the morning sun is better because that's what our clock is reliant upon. So the red light is, people that are real basic will tell you, oh, it smooths your skin out and it does this for you, but they don't really understand why. And I'm only brushing the surface here. I'm like, if you read the book, you're just gonna be like, holy shit, I'm really happy that guy told me to read the book. Because you'll realize why you do these things, why you go out and you expose your belly to the sun in the morning, because it's going to trigger all of these things. And they, so how they figured out the exclusion zone thing with the infrared radiation. So it's infrared radiation that grows it. And they were able to isolate this water with certain Teflon or something like that structures. And they put one in a box that had no infrared radiation, and it just shrunk, it collapsed it. And then they reintroduced it, and it grew like tremendously, like to 3 times the normal size. So think about that, right? If your body, it has been adapted to that over 200, well, more than that, the millions of years being in the wild, to waking up to the sunrise and being inundated with infrared light. And then all of a sudden we live in these fake caves, four walls and a ceiling, and the infrared light isn't this, or the infrared radiation is neutral all day. And we are losing that clock, that mechanism, that alarm clock for the true alarm clock for the body, right? So what are we doing with red light? We're simulating it, which sucks because we shouldn't simulate, right? This should always be your step 2, never your step 1, the red light. But if you live in Wisconsin like we do, sometimes you just got to make things work. You know, now go ahead.
Yeah. So the red light, we have the Firehawk red light box, and
It's the big device from EMR Tech.
EMR Tech. So Chris
Cross.
Cross.
He's good. He's a good guy.
He had vitiligo. And so that's how he got into this business, was he was trying to cure his own vitiligo. And so he created the best. I mean, these things, there's Jack right there. Jack works with him on this, and he has low flicker rate. I mean, everything is for healing. So red light is therapeutic. I see it as being therapeutic. So if you're a human who's like superpowers, like you're like Mark and your sweat doesn't stink, right? And you're like, you have like tremendous energy, you're going to get some benefits from this, but you really don't need it. The people that need it are the ones that are constipated. Like if you're constipated, go stand with your belly in front of that red light every morning around sunrise, because it is going to penetrate into the mitochondria. That's what red light does, is it gets deep into the mitochondria. And your mitochondria produce redox, which is basically your energy of your cell, the thing that makes it go, That redox is red light. Like if you want to build your redox up, you need a lot of sun. It's like charging your battery. Red light will do that. So if you have chronic fatigue, if you have fibromyalgia, all these diseases of like that they can't really figure out what's wrong, I have found a lot of people that get tremendous benefits from standing in one of these. And I mean, yes, we do it, and we're in the top echelon we consider ourselves in the top echelon of health because we never get sick. We don't have any symptoms of anything. We're healthy. We're happy, but we still do it because like Tom said, we live in Wisconsin. So it can be confusing to the body, like Chris will tell you, he's like, don't use it in the summertime. Go out and get the sun. Do the sun first, because synthetic light is just the perversion of the sun. That's all it is. Yeah. So yes, this can be so therapeutic and helpful for people. But again, nature is the best. Light.
Yeah, light and cold in some ways work a little bit like food, in a sense that's going to make your food it's just going to make your efficiency a lot better. Yeah. So the 300 calories that one person might eat, they might not be able to extract that much energy out of it because they're lethargic, they're not healthy, and so on. While somebody else, they get that 300 and boom, they feel great, and they're going to go work out, and they're going to go and probably produce more of these natural things that we're supposed to be producing kind of in the first place.
Yes, absolutely. You always just got to go back to, what would nature do? That's it. Just what would nature do? How is it in nature? And then your body, just like the vitamins you're talking about, getting it out of the meat, your body will do it because that's how nature intended it to be.
The red light will also, even though it won't do anything to the color of your skin, it's my understanding that it could assist you with getting a little bit more used to the sunlight. So it might be somebody with a really fair skin, some red light treatment is probably like the best place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. We love it.
Yeah. And then would you then, I guess, want to avoid it completely at night then?
I think you can do it like, you want to mimic the sun. So I think you would, your best time is sunrise, but and Chris can tell me if I'm wrong with this, but I think sunset also is when the red light happens. So I think around sunset, you can also get great benefits from it too.
Yeah, but it's the same thing. So like we wear the yellow during the day, right? When the sun's up, and we wear the red glasses at night. the red light is best if you do it around that sunrise, sunset. You don't want to do it necessarily, like you don't want to do it like 11 p.m. at night, right? You're sending confusing signals to the body, right? And it's the same thing with like a tanning bed. Like if you're going to go lay in a tanning bed, lay in it between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. because that's when the sun should be at its solar peak. And that's when you're getting the most intense thing out of this tanning bed. So that's when you should use that. If you simulate these things, I mean, again, it's always simulations of perversion, but that's the way to
give us so people have something real tangible to walk away with here. Give us some of your favorite foods that you might recommend to some of your clients.
Yeah. Well, any and all meat. We have a local farmer that we use called Wasita Farms in Wisconsin. They're grass fed. I really recommend everyone try to find their local rancher and make friends with them because it's just so important. And make sure the meat is eating the species specific diet. Make sure it's eating the grass. Make sure it's eating herbs around. So, Joel Salatin has Polyface Farms in Virginia. That's YouTube him and listen to him talk about the cows that go around and feed on all the herbs. And when you start taking all the different grasses and herbs out of the area and you don't keep it as natural as possible, the cows get sick. They get sick. Even if they're just eating regular grass, they have to eat what's in the environment, grown under the sun where they're at. So as much as they can be biodynamic farming, that's who you want. You got to find the person in your area and eat the beef. I mean, the beef is so nutrient dense for us. Fish is good, but again, fish is in the plastic filled ocean, so you gotta fight with that. Sardines are great. In my program, we do a sardine fast where the girls eat just sardines and they absolutely love it. Now there's some that don't, they choose not to do it. It's extra credit if they do. But anything with high DHA is really, really good for women. So interesting thing about women is if we carry our weight in our hips, in our butt, and our thighs, that's our place to hold our DHA. So DHA is made to build a baby's brain. You need a lot of DHA.
Have a bigger ass by having some fish.
Right. Exactly. And you want it.
You heard it here first, Power Project.
That's right. You want to have that there, especially if you're in your childbearing years, because that means that's where you're storing your DHA to grow your baby's brain. So, so I would say beef is probably our top pick.
But how do we eat, right? Like what do we do? We place about a $1,500 order every 2 to 2.5 weeks. And then we put a whole bunch of basically, it's everything from tenderloin to ribeye to custom. They have a custom ground. This place does. It's just to die for. A little tiny bit of bacon here and there, but we don't really eat that. Sometimes we give it to the kids more than that. Chicken thighs, chicken breasts. And that represents probably eggs. 80 and eggs. We eat a lot of eggs. 80 to that order is 80 to 90% of our calories. Probably. And if we're traveling more, obviously but that's how, like, if you want to 80-20 it, that's how we live. Like we live order to order with our rancher.
By the way, the kids too, minimal fruit and vegetables.
Yes.
All from youth to
we eat vegetables. Like I have no problem eating, like I'll chop up red onion or peppers or whatever and throw it into whatever I'm cooking.
Okay.
It's usually more just to have a difference in flavor. I'd say my cooking style is more Mediterranean, but we tend, like in wintertime, I'm typically carnivore. Like I just eat meat because the vegetables are shit. They're not growing, and like very rarely do I do stuff like that because peppers really don't grow in Wisconsin. Maybe for a month they could because we can do that, but typically they don't. So I try to just keep vegetables really limited, but we do eat them and the kids will eat them. They'll eat some carrots every once in a while, even though I don't think carrots are really great. carrots, Queen Anne lace was used as a form of morning after pill. So all these plants have...
Wait, is that a pepper?
Queen carrots.
Oh, it's a carrot.
Carrot is the plant Queen Anne's lace. Queen Anne's lace. And that's the original plant. And that plant was used as a morning after. So so we've genetically engineered it to be a carrot today.
Plants do have toxins. That is not a lie.
Yeah. So we eat low oxalate. We eat minimal veggies, and we're real about it. Like we go out to eat on occasion, I mean, we're living in the modern world too. So I don't ever want to create an orthorexic where someone who's just constantly trying to control, like you live in the modern world,
that's
you're not getting out of it.
No.
Right. It's not.
Being stressed over anything's not great.
So we do our best, but ultimately it's the meat and the fat.
Ruminant animals is best, right? Where they have the multi-chamber stomachs, they can properly digest the nutrients for us. So ruminant animals are the
I'm
best.
a strong believer in getting pork and dairy out of the diet. I think that dairy's okay a little bit in moderation, but pork is a 98.4% genetic match to us. So when we eat it, we tend to get really inflamed. That's why when you go in and get a heart valve replaced, it's a pig valve, right? It's because it's so close to us genetically. And so when we eat it, we tend to get really inflamed. And with women, we already tend to have a sluggish lymphatic system. And so we get really puffy, like our ankles will swell up, our wrists will swell up. We just get puffy. So I try to avoid the pork. It tastes delicious, but not very much of it. A little bacon every once in a while, like Tom said.
In the beginning of the podcast, you did mention herbs. And so are you kind of a believer that plants are maybe our medicine in some ways, but maybe not our food?
Exactly. Yes, I'm a huge believer of that. I do think that, that's how nature designed it, is we go find, that's what animals do. They go find the herb they need to help heal themselves. So yes, I've used herbs a lot. And it's amazing what the body can do when you find the right herb, but it's hard. And I would say it's about 20% of getting you there. 80% of it, probably 90% of it is your diet. But a lot of people, their guts are wrecked. Their bacteria's off. They got parasites. Their immune systems are tanked. So they got to go in and clean up all the damage they did. And herbs are great for that.
A constant thing that's been beneficial for all of our health has been intaking enough protein, but also intaking quality protein. And that's why we've been partnering with Good Life Proteins for years now. Good Life not only sells Piedmontese beef, which is our favorite beef, and the main reason why it's our favorite is because they have cuts of meat that have higher fat content, like their ribeyes and their chuck eyes, but they also have cuts of meat like their flat iron. Andrew, what's the macros on the flat iron?
Yeah, dude. So the flat iron has 23 grams of protein, only 2 grams of fat. But check this out. Their grass-fed sirloin essentially has no fat and 27 grams of protein.
There we go. So whether you're dieting and you want lower fat cuts or higher fat cuts, that's there. But you can also get yourself chicken. You can get yourself fish. You can get yourself scallops. You can get yourself all types of different meats. And I really suggest going to Good Life and venturing in and maybe playing around with your proteins. I mean, going back to the red meat, there's picanha.
All kinds of stuff.
Chorizo sausage. There's maple bacon.
That stuff's incredible.
The maple bacon is so good.
Maple bacon's really good.
Yo, my girl put those in these bell peppers with a steak and chicken. And oh my God, it was so good. But either way, guys, protein is essential. And the Good Life is the place where you can get all of your high quality proteins. So Andrew, how can they get it?
Yes, you can head over to goodlifeproteins.com and enter promo code PowerProject to save 20% off your entire order. Links in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
What are some herbs that are maybe popular that there's the adaptogens and stuff like that? What are your thoughts on some of those things? And some of them can be good for your brain and stuff like that.
Yeah, like lion's mane is really good for repairing the myelin sheath. Yeah, that's all good. But again, in the beginning of this, when we talked about Jen and her story with her stroke in her arm, she was doing all that shit. None of it worked. It wasn't until she started eating meat in the adequate amount that her body needed it that it could repair. We underestimate what protein does for our body. It is a major healing factor for us. So yeah, I mean, you can do herbs all day long, but if you're not eating adequate protein, you'll get nowhere.
Curious about your thoughts on this. Like you mentioned certain plants don't grow in Wisconsin, but like for me, right? We live in Sacramento, but my mom and my dad are from Port Harcourt, Nigeria. So like literally I'm the first generation here. All my family's from over there.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily have issues digesting much of anything, right? I don't eat a crazy amount of carbohydrates. I'll usually use carbs as a supplement, like
except for onions. You can't eat like a
not a fuck's an onion. Yeah,
when I eat like a onions.
There's a story there. There's a story.
He was having some gut issues a while back.
Yeah, because I eat like a whole onion and some herring, and it was so good, but that shit did not come out the right way.
Yeah.
Anyway, going back to what I was mentioning, most things like, for example, I don't really have an issue eating apples or certain things.
Yeah.
I also don't eat excess carbohydrates, right? So if somebody finds that they don't necessarily feel that there's health issues going on, what would you have them think about? That's question one. Then question two is like you, for example, and you know where you're from, right?
Yeah.
So do you guys pay attention to the things that have grown in that area where your ancestry is from, or what's growing where you live?
Great question.
That's really good. Can I start with the first one? So, and I'm going to do the wide angle thing, and I'll let her choose the tight angle. So the wide angle perspective of your genes and like, okay, so you're the first one here. Your family's originates from Nigeria.
Yes.
Said. So if you're not having problems now, so have you ever heard of Pottinger's cats?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so this was a scientist. Did you know that I was going this way?
I knew you were going to bring it up at some point.
I can't help it. It's like my favorite thing. Not favorite because it's a good thing, but favorite because it helps gets the point across. And it's been a little while since I've reviewed this. I might be a little bit off, so somebody's going to fact check me, but whatever. It's basically a doctor in like the 1940s, I think it was, named Pottinger, was dissecting cats and detecting the adrenalectomies on cats. And he had these number of cats in his study, and he was doing this particular study, right? And then he started getting these donations of cats to do these adrenalectomies on, and he got more than he could feed. And what he wasn't expecting to find, what he ended up finding. And so he fed these cats a certain diet, and then some a different diet. And there was a species specific diet. There's what the cats should eat. And then they had the condensed milk, the processed stuff. Mm-hmm. And then he fed, some of them that, and he kept really good notes. And what he found is that by the third or fourth generation, the calcium content in the cats that were fed the non-species specific diet, the calcium content in their bones dropped dramatically. By like the third or fourth generation, they started going blind. By like the fifth generation, they couldn't reproduce, something like this. I mean, it could be the sixth, it could have been the third. I can't remember exactly. By the seventh, they were basically paralyzed. They were like practically crippled. So your generation one, do you think there's any parallels, where your genes are in your environment right now? Are you going to, that's the question, right? Because so the cats, the environment includes your nutrition, right? They had the poor environment. And by the seventh generation, they couldn't reproduce.
So the cats that were fed, they were feeding cats raw milk and raw meat. And then he got all this shit ton of cats. And he was actually looking for a cure to tuberculosis, I believe. And so he got all these cats delivered to him. And so he has all these cats, and he's like, what am I going to feed him? They started feeding him cooked table scraps, and they started feeding them sweetened condensed milk and things they just had laying around. And they started noticing the cats that were fed, that were like secondary cats that weren't a part of the study, but backup, were getting sick. And they all of a sudden, after 4 generations or whatever it was, they couldn't reproduce anymore. Wow. And so that's what it goes back to, a species-specific diet. And that's what I was saying is a lot of people think, they want to get into the, we're omnivores thing, and like, what should we be eating? And it just, use your common sense. Really, what do most humans do best on? Most humans do best on meat.
True.
Almost all of them do. So that's probably our diet. We're probably carnivores that are the apex predators that can be omnivorous at times because we're opportunistic.
Because sometimes there wasn't meat. And we adapted because our genes are opportunistic as well. And so we could survive by eating some plants, right? We developed that adaptation so we could survive, right?
So this is what we've seen in the generations coming up is what are kids being born with now at astounding rates.
Alarming rates.
Autism and all these debilitating diseases that is like, why is this happening? Well, you got to go back to the Pottinger's cat study and look at why did it happen to them? Their diet changed.
For every generation that the cats got into the problem, it took that many generations for the DNA to get cleaned up on the way out. So if a 6th generation cat was given a species-specific diet of raw milk and raw meat, it took 5 more generations to get back to where their calcium was right. They weren't blind anymore, and they could reproduce at the same rate.
So to me, that's like the craziest thing. I've heard this before about you potentially impacting 5 to 7 and who knows how much longer. Like your behaviors right now, the way you eat, the way you drink, the way you exercise, or the lack thereof of any of those things is not just affecting your potential children, but their children and so on. It's like, it's a pretty wild responsibility when you start to think about it.
It is. I know. Yeah. It's empowering if you know what you're doing. And it literally, you're the survival of the wisest. Literally in 20, 30 generations, they're going to look back at this time and they're going to go, that was the fork in the road. That it stopped being the survival of the fittest and it started being the survival of the wisest. And the people that are going to be alive in 30 generations are the ones that are going to be the ancestors of the people like us now that are having these conversations, that are thinking about this stuff. That's going to be because look, we're not cats. I get it. Somebody's gonna be like, well, we're not fucking cats. Somebody's fucking gonna say that, and that's fine. And I get it. We're not cats, but the progression's pretty freaking similar, right? We're starting like
Pretty
in the
obvious something's
70s and
wrong.
80s. There wasn't conversations about young kids not getting pregnant, right? Not at the rate they are now. There's 1 in 50 kids is autistic now. It was like 1 in 10,000 40 years ago.
I have a question for you guys on this. And I don't disagree with you because like when you see like kids are spending way more time inside looking at screens, nutrition is shit. But, you know, let's say fucking the 20s, 1910s, the society was a bit more agrarian. So like if there was an odd person working or doing something in a field or something, like they were just like, you know, Jeff's a little odd. Jeff could totally be autistic, but like no one called
one
Jeff
knew.
autistic.
Yeah, nobody
right?
quantified it. Yep.
And then there's the other thing where it's like, and I was talking to my girlfriend about this, apparently like when it comes to women who are autistic or young girls who are autistic, there are different things that are looked for versus young boys who are autistic. And when you see rates going up, some of that has to do with like, oh, we're actually seeing
The
different
proclivity
things.
to count it. Yeah.
So-
But
what are
that
your
doesn't,
thoughts? What are your thoughts?
that's probably a 10% issue, not a 90.
Gotcha.
You know, our genes aren't that fucked up to believe that 300 years ago, 1 in 50 of the offspring of a human race, is the offspring of any animal race, 1 in 50 really fucked up? No, they're not.
Well,
So, I mean,
I just look at like back when we were kids. I'm a child of the 80s. I graduated in 1998. And we had about, I think there was in our high school, right, was 4 grades, and I was in a small town, so there was about 400 kids in the high school, and the whole high school, and there was maybe, I don't know, 10 children with disabilities back then. They had their own teacher, they had their own classroom. There's maybe 10 in the whole high school.
It wasn't gray. It was pretty black and white.
No.
Right? It wasn't like the 10 were the 10 and there weren't any other ones.
Both my sisters work at the school, and you go now, and it has tripled with the children with disabilities.
There's a problem.
So there's a problem. There's a problem. Same number of kids going to the high school, but the disabilities have tripled. So, you know, you just got to step back.
And there's also medication, right? There's medication for those things. So maybe it's being identified more because of that.
That argument is that, and I know you're not making that argument, but that argument that when it's made, most likely stems from pharma, right? Planting an argument for to distract us from the truth.
Okay.
Right? Like, oh, well, we're just counting more now. That's why. I mean, that's just would be right what you'd say first.
The children I'm talking about too are with these disabilities. They're not just ADHD kids. These are actual severe birth-born disabilities. So they're kids that are in wheelchairs, kids that are, you know, nonverbal. So these kids have tripled in just since the time I've been there.
Yeah.
Something's up.
Why do you guys care so much about this? Why do you have a family clinic that people can go to and get help? And then why you guys seem to be pushing on YouTube and social media? Why does it matter to you guys so much?
So I have a big goal to get to the moms, because I believe the moms, they're the health center of the family, and they're the ones that can educate. I think it's our roles. Our dads are the teachers of, you know, a lot of life, you know, skills, but moms really can help their kids to reconnect with their bodies and listen to their intuition, because women are more intuitive, and help their kids find that in them. And I think that we're just so disconnected between social media and just the state of the world it's in. We've lost that in the family, the matriarch. And so it's my goal to get back in with me. And I'm not against, you know, working with the guys. We do have a men's program coming out, but the women are the health center, and we need to get to them so we can get to the kids.
And
so
it's
this changes.
because really it's rooted in selfish desires. We want our kids to grow up and have a world to live in where it's like worth living, right? We want them to live in a world where people start thinking and stop dumping plastic in the ocean. We want to have a world where people start thinking and stop taking so many SSRIs and antidepressants that they end up in the water system and are recirculated into us, causing endocrine disruptors, making boys wonder if they're girls, right? We need to start asking better freaking questions. And the way that you do that is you start by educating the women, restoring the bond or that generational link of knowledge, and then you go from there, right? You start asking better questions, and you start, like we always say, the woman is the health nucleus of the family. What the woman does, the man usually does. What the man does, what the husband does, the woman doesn't often do. So we do this for women. And then right in our program, right when we start, Candi says, one of the promises you have to make to me is that what you learn, you're going to share with your kids. Because it's selfishly, we want our kids to live in a better world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's research. There's a huge link between the mother's education and the children's education level. And there's a huge link between what the mother does physically for fitness and what the children do. Probably because they're maybe closer in proximity and maybe dad is off playing pool with his friends or whatever.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Where can people find you guys and where can they find out more about you?
Yeah, so Instagram is a great place to learn more about us. We publish about a reel a day, one Instagram reel a day, and that's the Primal Bod. That's our handle. So that's where you can get a lot of information. Then our website is primalbod.com.
And where's the book? You guys got to make a book.
We actually are talking.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, we're talking in that right now. It's probably going to be a year before it's done, but and then we're probably going to be more present on YouTube soon. We have a channel. I think it's Candi Fraizer is the channel.
Fraizer,
is the channel. But
we have
some ideas.
We have some things.
Fun.
Are
Are you actually paying your son to do this, or is it,
oh yeah,
or is it free labor over there?
Yeah. Well, they've been really helpful and not been too demanding. But
they appreciate the internship.
This is it.
Well, that's the thing, back in the day, the generational wisdom, right? The father would teach the kids the art, right? And like, that's the idea is, we go to college now and how much we pay for college, 60, 80 grand a college. Like that money the parents should be spreading that information. And so our kids have been thoughtful and listened to us, and they know right now they're getting paid in wisdom, and they will be paid handsomely because they're helping us establish an awesome little empire.
They have a perfect
They
life.
do. We don't.
They
we
have
don't
a
withhold.
pimped out apartment.
Paid in wisdom.
They all have brand new cars. Like they are not hurting.
They're going to watch this. They're going to go, we're supposed to be getting paid.
Wait a second.
What the hell?
If you guys enjoyed this episode with Candi and Tom Fraizer, then check out this episode with Uncle Jack Cruz. That was a great podcast. We learned a lot. We are clowns. I got offended, but I mean, either way, it was a great podcast. I learned a lot. Check it out.